Yeah.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. We are very excited to have you all here because we are on our fourth advisory committee meeting. And we are at the end of the first phase of the comprehensive plan. This is a big milestone for the city. And, we once again appreciate your participation and your volunteerism and your dedication to the city. Tonight, we're going to go over a work in progress as we finalize the final report for City Council to consider at the public hearing on October 25th. So we're less than 2 weeks away from that. And again, it's a big milestone. What's going to happen is that council is going to read the report, hear the presentation, and based on their scheduled public hearings, open up to the public and then eventually go through a short environmental process, confer with the county, and then, our hopes is adopt this first phase, which is, simply, it's not a full-on comprehensive plan. It's a framework for downtown, a 50-ish block area that will serve as a guide. Now, to be clear, just preface a little bit, this part of the comprehensive plan is a guide. So we will not have very specific zoning calculations and very specific form recommendations. It's going to heavily focus on, the density distribution throughout downtown. It's going to focus on, such items as affordable housing, parking, streetscapes, items like that, just to give an overall guide of when developers do come in, that there is something to base conversations on for the city council to negotiate for rezonings with developers. The intent at the end of the entire comp plan was to begin the process to really redo the zoning ordinance. So just to be clear, we are not there yet. And the advice, these recommendations, I should say, that this document will provide us will not provide an overall zoning ordinance rewrite, but as again, just a guide to base it on for city council to consider rezonings, as well as land use board to have an understanding of what's being considered, when deciding on variances, site plans on site specific projects. So
is there a time frame for the zoning to be redone?
well, we would have to finish the comp plan first, and just in conference with colleagues of mine, that will probably take anywhere from 7 to 12 months. Just
And
depends on
after-
how it-
finish
After
the-
adoption?
Correct.
The entire comprehensive plan or just this section for the zoning to be effective?
Well, the zoning would the rewriting of the zoning ordinance would occur after the comprehensive plan is done.
The entire comprehensive plan.
Yes, correct.
You mind clarifying? I'm not sure if I got this properly. So what exactly is happening on October 20th?
There'll be a public hearing for the report that the team led by Mud Workshop, including AKRF and Parents for Progress, will present, and it will be open to the public for viewing and comment, and both in person and written comment after that. And based on the council's desired time schedule, allow for public comment. They will take into consideration some necessary adjustments, and then council will then vote and adopt and or deny.
So that's in 9 days. When will the paperwork for that be made available? Because a lot of times we go into these hearings and you have to have some time beforehand to review that stuff, especially something as complex as this. When will that be made available publicly to download so people can cover it?
Well, I'll allow our
Okay.
folks to talk about that, probably not before the 25th or too far before the 25th, just because we've made a lot of recommendations and adjustments for it. And so again, it'll be council's timeline, but during that, this first meeting is to be, used as a presentation, like this is supposed to be the real of the town plan. I understand what you're saying, though.
But that is sometimes, I'm sorry, if I dwell on this, because this is sometimes what happens here, that basically a public hearing becomes a public listening session. Right, a public hearing, if it is a public hearing, is supposed to listen to comments of public,
Yes,
right?
that's,
So the public needs to be able to go in there, form at the point when they're entering the hearing, and their voices need to be heard, right? Otherwise, it's basically a presentation or listening session, and it is not a public hearing. So however you guys want to do that, but it is not, it's not a real public hearing if people don't have the information to give meaningful.
I understand. Appreciate that. Thank you.
And has the drafts changed since what was sent to us, who signed the confidentiality statement? Because so would we be
been a lot
able to
of work.
have that sent again? Can we get it sent again?
Yeah, once,
Because I like to take my time,
sure.
read through.
And once it goes before the council, will there be potential for more changes to it?
Yes.
My understanding, maybe I'm reading into what you're saying, is that you're doing the presentation to the council, and then the council will actually create its own public hearing schedule for the public to actually respond to the city council with their comments about.
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of city
Okay.
council and, just being. One, it's like, I don't know if the 25th will be the only public hearing, it'll be the next one on the 8th or the one after that, it depends on the discretion of the city council.
Okay.
Based on the amount of feedback that they receive from the public.
Well, if the revisions to the draft have been completed, I'm wondering why this committee didn't see it ahead of this meeting, because now we too are sitting here in a listening session.
It's not completed as of yet. As I mentioned originally, the original timeline was for council on October 11th. But we had internally significant amount of comments and discussions with the consultants, and more time is needed to work on it. But we didn't want to keep bumping things out, and so we wanted to try to stick to a timeline as best as possible. And so we want to give the advisory committee an opportunity for patient update before anything else is made public. Okay, if there are no other comments at the moment, I'll turn it over to Shachi Pandey from Mudworking.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out here again. I see a number of faces that, we've worked with throughout the course of past 9 months, and some new faces, so welcome. We want to start with what we're discussing today. If you could go to the next slide, please. So what we have for you today is really, 3 main things that we want to present to you: where we are in the process, how we got here, and focus our time on the recommendations that we have updated based on the feedback that you provided to us in the on the drafts document that we submitted. I hope everybody got a chance to review the draft and provide your feedback. So thank you for that. Now, please do know that we won't be able to go into too much detail in the recommendations, given that this is a presentation and the time is limited. But what we want to request you to do is that if there is some points that you would like us to address more specifically, please do, note that. And when we get to the advisory committee comments, we've left about 30 minutes for advisory committee comments and feedback today as well. And then you could ask us questions or, give us more pointed feedback on specifics. And then lastly, I think we just want to see what happens next. Looking ahead, there's going to be a city council meeting on the 25th, and what the phase 2 would look like. So where we are in the process on the next slide is that we started the process sometime in December of last year. We moved through a lot of community conversations between December and March, which is, in March, we met you in December, of course, when we first started the work on the project, but in March really was the first time that we had 6 working sessions with you. And then, subsequently, public workshops and all of that, and our own technical analysis. All of that has led to where we are today, which is we're at our 4th advisory committee meeting. And one of those meetings was converted into 6 workshops, actually. So there were more than we've had, a number of opportunities to meet with you. And in addition, we, also started to work on, if you could go to the next slide, please. We've had several, opportunities to spread out in the city, and led by Department of Planning and Community Development, several community conversations in different languages. And there were 9 of them in total. We also had 2 roundtables with the real estate group. We had a community-wide survey, which was digital, and we had about 400 survey takers. We had a digital mapping tool to mimic the second workshop, which was more place-based and got specific to what the downtown revitalization would look like. And I spoke about the advisory committee meetings and working sessions, but in between this, we also had a check-in with the city council, did a presentation to them about our work in progress before the second public workshop. And then we've had several meetings and working sessions with the Department of Planning and Community Development. So all of that has sort of, coalesced into the draft recommendations that you saw. And today we're here to give you, address, the changes that you requested and how we've addressed them. So moving on to the next slide, I want to go really quickly, just a recap of some of the existing conditions and the community priorities that we heard. Feel free to let me know if you want us to go faster on this. But the top 5 community priorities that we heard was preserve the character of the downtown corridor. It was the first time that the downtown corridor was identified, Ramerton Avenue and Southport Avenue. And not only preserve its character, but also allow some growth in a limited capacity so that it can attract the critical mass that is necessary to support businesses and to support a downtown corridor in the real sense. The second one was to encourage mixed uses and also allow housing to combat vacancy and increase increase diverse businesses. Because right now, as we'll see, is there are a number of businesses that are personal care. And what we want to do is have more diverse, more restaurants, more, retail, diversity of retail. So that was a second really important priority. The third was that the streets themselves would be reimagined to have more trees, more bicycles, and more and traffic could be really calmed. And what I'm saying right now is specific to the downtown, not to the entire city. So this is specific to the downtown. And then when we talk to people in the first public workshop, something very important came up was that places don't feel interconnected. That is that there are parks that are around at the edges of the city of Mount Vernon, but there are very few public open spaces that are within the downtown. So there's a way to have a network of connected parks and places and things to do that would be great. And something else that came up is that currently there is a very high vacancy or very high number of underutilized lots in the downtown area, which we need to figure out what to do about as they wait to have more to be revitalized. So moving on to the second slide. And in terms of the vision, and again, this is focused just on downtown. We picked out some of the visions that were, what would you like to see in downtown? I think that people wanted to really see a lot more activity in terms of cultural.
Can you read it? We can't see it.
Okay, I will read it. The question that we asked was, which of the following activities would you like to see more of in downtown? and cultural resources were something that were ranked around 55%.
Is that the green one?
That's the blue one. That is the
See, that's what I
highest.
can't see is the lighting,
Yeah.
the right underneath.
It's cultural resources.
Here's the
And then
blue.
followed closely by it is music and entertainment,
Green.
which is the green one. And then the sign colored one, which is, well, we'd like to see some more street fairs and festivals. And those are the top three things that people would like to see more of in downtown, to be able to say, oh yeah, this is my downtown and this is what I want to do in downtown when I come here. The next is, what type of businesses would you like to see? And then very, very close to each other are three things: restaurants, family entertainment, and retail shops. They're all somewhere between the 65 to 70%. That's what people chose. And then lastly, I think we also asked cultural amenities that can be improved or added on. Farmers market by a big margin, and street fairs and festivals and music concerts. So those are the three things that were the top priority. On the following slide, when we asked people, all right, you would like to see these things, but what are the top improvements that you would like to see in the downtown? And the ones that were, sort of a tie, I would say, are improved storefronts and well-maintained facades, and cleanliness and adequate waste disposal facilities. And so those are the two things that the ones that you see in the green and the blue. And then in yellow, you'll see that everybody wanted to have better streets, better streetscapes.
Better streetscapes.
Can I interject? Just
Yes.
a question, because I know one thing we spoke about in the groups from time to time was making 4th Avenue from First to Second pedestrian only.
Mhm.
That didn't make the final cut, I take it, because I didn't see it. in the draft.
We are going to go to that section of, which is number 2, that section, and that's something we heard, and we want to explain how we did it. So there is an all pedestrian, locations, but then they are all pedestrian with the exception of having emergency vehicles and transit. And we'll point out, it's not
Okay.
between
All right, I
first
think
and
it's a.
second. Yeah, it's a very
it needs
important.
a bold move.
Absolutely
and that might
important.
be it, So, okay.
Yeah, absolutely important. Maybe not exactly at the location that you said, but based on what we heard in the community workshops, everywhere, we do have an all pedestrian square, and we'll get to it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And then cultural facilities are, the third opportunity that should be encouraged by any new downtown development. So if there is a new development in the downtown, people would really like to see more restaurants.
That's me, sorry.
More streetscapes and public realm improvements. So really the big thing is that we want a really much more improved public realm, much more improved, much more accessible streetscapes for all modes of transportation, more greenery, more public spaces. Those were really the top things that people said they would like to see in the downtown. And if we go to the following slide, there were a lot of place-specific feedback also that we thought. If you can't read it, I will read it out for you. The first that you can see in the black line was prioritizing pedestrian movement along the downtown corridor. Prioritizing that movement along the downtown corridor. So not just between the East First and East Second, but prioritizing that on the entire corridor. Second was, and I'm going from anti-clockwise. So you see strengthened connections along the Metro North track. Now that was something that was very, very critical. Across Metro North tracks, people really saw that place as a place that they wanted to be fully pedestrian. Because the switch between East First and over to Gramerton was something that was seen as a place where a big difference in the characters of the communities, but also being able to travel from one side of the downtown corridor to the next.
Are you talking about near Food Town or the opposite side?
Where?
Near Food Town or the opposite side?
Bremerton Avenue,
Bremerton
bridge
Avenue.
between
Bridge, yeah.
Bremerton and
East
Fourth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Over the cut.
Oh,
The cut. over the cut, the bridge, over the cut, yeah.
So one of my things,
There's several of those, so we're not just talking about one.
Yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
asked, because she's at the train station, so I thought she was talking about
Right.
going to.
Yeah.
No, this is on, yeah, this is, so the downtown corridor for everyone's, was defined after the first public workshop, and I think a couple advisory committee meetings or the 6 working sessions. Collectively, we define the downtown corridors, downtown corridor as Ramerton Avenue and South Fourth Avenue. So that is the corridor whenever I refer to
Downtown.
Ramerton, downtown corridor, yeah.
Yeah.
It extends from, you'll see Hartley Park
Yeah.
in the,
I got it here because I couldn't see it there. But the thing is for me that when I was trying to review this and make educated comments,
Yeah.
I can't see what streets they are on any of the maps. I can't tell where the zone is
you're
to.
absolutely right, yeah. We are, this, and as we said that we, quickly put this together, you're absolutely right. We should have streets, at least the major streets on there.
Yeah, so you have some point of orientation.
Some orientation, yeah. And I apologize for that, we'll correct it. And then that circle that you see around, South Fourth and East First, that now, again, the circle is a diagrammatic circle. It's not really the extent, but what people really want to do was limit the traffic flow in that area so that the pedestrians could be prioritized. And then revitalizing vacant lots where they exist in the downtown area. And East First Street, they saw as the main traffic corridor. So defining the entry into Mount Vernon and the exit, which I think we did in our report, that was also seen as really important. Like, where do people get off the highway? How do they enter downtown, and where do they exit? That was really important. And then lastly, higher densities. People said that could be placed around the Metro North station, the Metro North East station. Those were the areas that's in. And in terms of other densities, limiting it to Village Field, and higher densities concentrated around Metro North. So on the next slide, you'll see what we went and did was looked at the streets, and I think we may have presented some of these to you in previous meetings. But really, what we were trying to do was look at the downtown corridor specifically, but at different locations and different times of the day and different days of the week, to figure out what are the things that we could do in order to, really address the streetscape, really address the walkability. Some of the things that we noticed are here. One is that the street wall is kind of uneven. Something is 1 story, then it's 2 story, so that is something that didn't feel like you were walking in like an even, like a pedestrian enclosure that you have. The sidewalks, not so visible in this one, but there are sidewalks that were not well maintained, but there's also a lot of businesses that were using the sidewalks as an extension of their own businesses with things that they had on the sidewalk, so difficult for pedestrians to walk. Storefront transparency, where you see, a lot of the storefronts here in this are shuttered, but even otherwise, because of the signages that are on the glass that people have put on their signs, you can't really see what's going on inside. So it isn't, when you say it's a little bit, it's a little difficult when you walk down the street. You don't feel super excited about, what's happening, or you don't feel invited into the storefront. And that's what we say is, adds to transparency. And then some consistency in the fixtures, the garbage cans, the trash cans, the lighting fixture, if that could be uniform. And if the trees could be a little bit more consistent. So, at the eye level, at that scale, the human scale, these are some of the things we noticed. On the next slide, we also started thinking about, okay, how did this actually come about? Did this come about only because people decided, or were there some regulations? And were there some in downtown's zoning code that led to this? And of course, what we realized is that the downtown zoning code actually has some really unusual restrictions. Some of them, you'll see listed here that there are no community purpose buildings allowed in the downtown business zone, in the neighborhood business zone, and the OB business zone. You'll see that The biggest, brightest red piece is the DB, which is the downtown business zone, which allows for 10 stories. The OB is the light pinkish zone, which allows for 3 stories. So currently your downtown allows for 10 stories, right? The reddish, brightest red part that you see. And what was generally prohibited everywhere was residential. And that is what was leading to like a critical mass, or maybe after 6:30 or 7, when all the office crowd and the retail stores are closed, there's nothing really happening downtown. You want more of a mixed use where people can go to. So on the next slide,
Before you go, I'm just wondering why, these are just examples. We're not saying that museums are prohibited.
That's what it is now.
that's what it is
Is
now.
that
What our current zoning says.
Restrictions.
Yes, right.
There's a bunch of those kind of
Yeah.
oddities, right? And that's what we're.
Yeah,
But that's what we're trying to like see what,
sorry, I'm a little behind because it didn't roll through.
How
my-
far back did the zoning go?
Long time.
very time, it's very long.
But it's not uncommon, right, with a lot of communities, right? You adopt zoning changes to address a problem or facilitate an opportunity,
One problem.
right? Or facilitate an opportunity, and sometimes it doesn't age as well.
Yeah, and so you have to review it.
Review it
often. Yeah.
and update it.
But it's weird, like now that we're bringing it up, because I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with Aqua. To me, that's like a mini museum, because if you go in there, it's an entire art gallery, and there people can come in, walk around and stuff. They'll have events upstairs. It's like, it doesn't have to be something grand, but I feel like a museum would be something that would be different to have here, because nowhere else in the world
Absolutely.
really has that.
Absolutely.
It's limited, so it doesn't have to be something, like you said, 10 stories high, but
No.
that's
no,
a
no,
great and perfect example, because it's been in the community for years.
Yeah.
Why not just renovate it?
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to make sure that the laws, the existing code can allow for more of those, and allow to preserve the ones that are already there and are cherished by the community.
And how
Right.
far are the businesses that are in these different zoned areas currently conforming?
Okay, so we'll go to the next slide and then you'll see that. So you see that most of the conforming uses are way all along the downtown corridor, right? And these are non-conforming by use. So currently there are mixed residential and commercial and manufacturing. So mixed use along the downtown corridor, it is combined with residential manufacturing and commercial.
It is now.
It is now, that's the.
It exists now, but
Yes.
it's not technically permitted.
It's not permitted, no.
In some instances.
Sorry, I'm just trying to be clear.
It doesn't mean it's illegal, it might
I
have
understand.
predated the.
I understand what it
Okay,
means.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure.
Yep.
So the market reality, or, how things have evolved over time, show these many, non-conforming by use, right? We're not saying by density or zoning.
Right, by use.
Yeah,
So all those
What it's
colors,
showing.
all those different colors are non-conforming uses?
they are non-conforming uses.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes, yes. And I think that what we're trying to say is that, yes, because we talked about uses, we want to really get to uses now in the, it's the first thing we want to, look at when we get to our downtown.
They said the CVS up on Broad, that great big red one, it's completely out of. Must be.
No, it's not. It's
Not?
not part of the downtown.
Oh, I can't tell where the heck I am.
But instead of,
I'm like,
it's meant to be illustrative, right? It just, I think that's all this is.
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's get to the next slide. And not only that, we also wanted to see that if we're looking at uses, if we're looking at all of these improvements we want to do, who's gonna live here? Who lives here now? We did a little bit of socioeconomic, study, which we did talk about. What we want to focus on here, a little bit of housing. What exactly, how rent burdened or cost burdened are the people living here? And 50% of the people are households are cost burdened.
So
Right?
you say
And off that-
50% of those in the downtown Just
No,
not-
it's all apartment. This is citywide. This is citywide. 50%, there's no way to get, just the downtown, because the boundary is something that we, with you, develop. But 50% of an entire city of the household, 50% of the households are cost burden. But of those.
Through 21.
Percent of the renters are cost burden, including 32% who are severe.
I think it's increased much more across the board now.
It probably has increased because
Yeah.
in the past few years, we've seen the cost of housing outpace wages.
Yeah, and I'm a realtor. I see
Yeah.
what rentals are going for and houses are going for. I think it's higher.
Absolutely.
And so on the next slide, you'll see that if we look at businesses, so that was housing, going to businesses and economic development. In the downtown, we noticed between 25 to 30% vacancy, which I think 10% is kind of healthy, or 10% is what we notice in other downtowns. And you'll see that 37%, including and accessories and health and personal care combined. So that's 37%, which is a very over a third high percentage. That combined with 30% vacancy is you have 60% of your, downtown. So we need to really think about that as well. Going to the next slide. So all of that technical analysis and the feedback that we received from you, from the community, led to these 6 revitalization goals, which we have presented to you before, but I just want to leave it up here for 60 seconds so that everybody can remind themselves of what we had agreed to collectively. I can speak it if you guys want me to.
Yeah, no, I
I'll
can't read it from here.
Okay, I'll read it. So the first one was define building density and uses in and around downtown to attract consumer base and investment to support businesses. So that is what we want to do. The purpose of that is to attract a consumer base and investment to support businesses. Second, reinforce the identity of Gramerton, Southport, and Southport Avenues as the downtown corridor. Third, make transit use efficient and a convenient choice for residents and visitors. Fourth, repurpose underused lots and buildings with interim community uses and integrate them into the urban fabric as they await new development and/or ownership. Fifth, create a recognizable network of open spaces and pedestrian connections for a walkable downtown district. And last but not the least, evaluate existing barriers to economic development and advance a cohesive strategy to assist local business owners and attract new investment, including through an overhaul of the downtown zoning regulations.
So I have a question. So you mentioned ownership in item 4.
Yes.
And I know that's one thing we spoke about as a group a few times, about the need or desire. It would make sense to somehow incentivize more ownership, not just rentals, which is what we see mostly going on as far as residents go, right?
Mhm.
Residential does. So do you speak to that any further in the plan?
Yes.
Great, I'll wait to hear.
On this contract revenue.
Okay, so since so many of these recommendations, what we did was we kind of wanted to go really quickly and say urban design recommendations, zoning recommendations, and then economic development recommendations. So we've divided these up into 3 broad categories that we think are really important for the downtown. So we're just going to lead with the urban design because there's so much place-based feedback that we got from everyone. So what you'll see on the right is a guideline and it is a drawing that we developed of South 4th Avenue. But again, it is a guideline. What we're showing here are buildings that are up to 4 stories. You can see other buildings in the background, but it's up to 4 stories. You'll see that the street level is all a diversity of different businesses. You'll see that the first floor has retail, but the upper floor also allows things like a dance studio or another use by maybe an artist studio or other light manufacturing related uses, you'll see that the street itself has been changed a little bit. The geometry of the street has been changed a little bit to calm the traffic. And there are, a uniformity of the fixtures that are on the street.
But there are cars there, so this is not the pedestrian.
Yes, there are cars there. So again, the idea was prioritize pedestrians, but not eliminate the cars. Because, a lot of businesses also would want to have some parking and for people to be able to get to them, not just from within downtown and in Mount Vernon, but from outside as well, right? So there are cars, but we'll come to the next one where we'll show you a much more pedestrian heavy location.
So the cars are on like one side, or, I mean, I don't know if you're getting that specific.
No,
They're on
they're on both sides. Yeah, so it's a one lane on either side, so we haven't really changed the right of way.
Have you increased the sidewalk depth?
So it's a little bit increased, yes.
Only where that's.
I mean, as you see, that's a chicane. Do you see that? So the sidewalk is going in and then coming out.
Right.
And it's so wherever there's a possibility for the sidewalk to expand in certain places, right? And we're providing that flexibility because we're not really designing South Fourth just yet. There'll be a lot that'll go into it, but we provided, kind of like a guideline that
So,
can be expanded.
I just want to bring out again and remind everyone that there is a lot on Fifth Avenue in very close proximity to the shopping district. And I just think, again, we need to make sure we vet out whether that can be used and this to be. Fifth Avenue.
Isn't Grace doing something in that area?
Grace doesn't own that, the city does. I
Yeah,
don't.
the city owned the lot,
Isn't Grace Rapids doing something with? Grace wants it,
Grace, it does. To the south of Grace Baptist Church, they have a lot that there's an intention to build affordable housing there. It's not stopped, but it's been a slow go for whatever reason. We need an update on that. But across the street from there is a city-owned lot. Yeah.
This is on South Fifth.
Yes.
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 Yeah, we're gonna come to that and
No,
we'll show
okay,
you.
and I don't want to get carried away, but I do want to say that, you need to be careful to not benefit one particular developer over what is right for the city as a whole. And I know those are touchy things and very political. However, I really think it's a game changer if Fourth Avenue becomes pedestrian only. I think it's a game changer.
Yeah, see, I would say pedestrian only and totally close to cars can be difficult for a number of things. And even from a regulation perspective, maintaining it and managing that street, especially in case of an emergency. I mean, we need emergency vehicles, we need transit, right? There could be times when you try to close the street, say, on the weekends, and that it is 100% pedestrian on the weekends, but maybe on the weekdays, you need to have it be, because you need to get your deliveries in. If you're going to have a diversity of businesses, you cannot, all businesses, small businesses cannot time and, manage that their deliveries can only, because it's more expensive for them. So in some ways because they need the street infrastructure for a number of things that the businesses need to thrive. So the street is very important for them.
Yeah, if I may jump in just on this, I think of, pedestrian plaza is a good idea. And when the topic of between South Fork between First and Second came about, I thought, I agreed, but with the caveat that, not all pedestrian plazas are developed the same. And if I may go north a little bit, just with my experience, if anyone's ever been to Ithaca or Burlington, Vermont, those have very nice, multi-block pedestrian walkways. It's very relaxed, it's just very vibrant. I went to school in Binghamton, New York, and they did a pedestrian plaza that leads into an office building, and it took years to get activity because people saw it as more dead space, and they didn't. They were not creative in replacing the parking, and there was like nothing leading up to it. So design manage.
There are challenges, no doubt about it.
Yeah, so, and sometimes there's park pedestrian plazas, like you'll have two turnarounds or cul-de-sacs in the middle. Can be a plaza, but as Shachi was saying, tenant parking is, just for the vendors, a concern, and so how do we address that? And she does have a recommendation, an alternate recommendation for that, which she'll get to.
And the last thing, and even if it was parking on one side, one lane of traffic,
Yeah.
to just kind of change things, maybe, we can hybrid, have it be a hybrid or something.
Yeah, so
Anyway.
the street, this is the right of way of the street right now. This is how we've sort of changed it, where we are saying that, you could go, if this is your current street right now,
Mhm.
right? You could actually. So this is your space, the expanded space, right? And your car moves slowly.
Could you rotate that around?
Yeah. So you see, this is the space,
Yeah.
like a chicane. So your car is moving more in really wide radii, but all of the space that is left over can either be taken over for a sidewalk. So in effect, what's happening is that you are changing the right of way geometry, but you're not necessarily to change how you feel the space, but you're not necessarily taking away from, the essential functions that are needed for businesses to thrive, for deliveries to happen, for emergency services, because those are all.
And the housing that you're recommending to be above, the tenants will have cars.
Only 4
Where
levels.
will they go? But it's 4
Yeah.
levels, but two of those levels will be residential.
Yeah.
Will they be residential? You mentioned just.
We're gonna
We're gonna get to that.
And I say for the handicap.
I was going to say,
Pedestrian
somebody
is
please.
great.
Yeah.
But not everybody can walk.
Right.
So if
And
you're
those are
gonna,
long streets as it is.
if you're gonna eliminate
So-
cars, you have to either have some kind of trolley or small transit for those who can't walk. So,
Yeah, no, but the point is, we're saying we're not getting rid of cars.
but with that, it's not good for the handicapped. That-
It's
That's.
it's an extremely gentle, and this is one of the ways to calm traffic. What we're actually trying to say is that it doesn't have to be this.
Yeah.
It could be designed at a later date to be, a different style or a
I
different.
just wanted to. For consideration.
Absolutely. So the considerations that we're making here are, let's not, leave out anybody. Let's not leave out the businesses. Let's not leave out people who might be, physically challenged or handicapped. Let's not leave out maybe the deliveries or, the commercial. So I think that that's what we're trying to say, that it should not be 100% pedestrian, because we do need vehicular. Yes.
More so question statement, not directly involving the makeup of it, but currently on that 4th Avenue strip, there are a lot of homeless people that dwell there. It's been brought to the attention of some local city officials, and they've said that nothing can be done about it because they're not bothering anyone. Moving forward, I know this isn't gonna happen overnight, but I'd hate for you guys to start making these developments and making it look better, and then you still have that problem there. So is there any way us as a board or you guys can bring that to the attention of higher ups? Because even now, that's why a lot of people don't like going on 4th Avenue, because there will be people sitting in front of businesses asking for money, or people that, right, laying down on the ground.
It's happened to me right here. Somebody just came up and put their face in my face and they
It's like,
not running down there.
nobody
I
wants
was like,
to do it.
whoa.
Yes,
And that's gonna be a
these
big-
are enforcement issues, and so
Well-
while it's not, they're enforcement issues.
Yeah, but we don't get enforcement. So, yeah.
So, well, that's not part of this plan.
No,
I know, it's what we keep
Yeah,
saying.
that's what I'm saying,
have a
on your
shelter
end,
that
like,
goes out
One person.
early in the morning.
what can we do to help you enforce that? That's what I'm.
Well, we won't be the enforcing authority to do it, but I think that is definitely something
But
that.
there are ways with design that you can deter certain activities, whether it's,
Yeah.
benches and benches that, people can't, loiter or sleep on, or just other elements of design that deter people from, it doesn't like necessarily like scare.
I mean, it's a combination of,
You gotta move some benches, cause they lay down there at night, they got the out there, I told the mayor, some of them, she did move some of them. Cause that's a hotel out there at night in front of Food Town. You know, they lay there, there's several properties.
Plaza, they're not even talking
I think
about the
what-
Patel Plaza issue, they're talking
Yeah.
about Fourth Street.
one of the things that I wanna say is that, one of the things I wanna say is that whatever you're seeing here is probably not gonna happen all at once tomorrow. This is a, 10-year long vision. So what, or it will not, it will definitely not happen unless there is, it will not happen. So the way it will happen would be in a piecemeal way. It will start with, a small area and then it'll.
Folks, can we have one conversation? Because there are people online trying to listen and hear and understand.
So it's not gonna happen all at once in 1 or 2 years. It'll happen over a period of many years. Hopefully 10 years, but if Mount Vernon is able to do that in 10 years, then thumbs up to Mount Vernon. That would be a really fast-paced process of this transformation that we're suggesting. So what we have here is a vision that you want to achieve after 10 or 15 years. And I think that the way to think about it is it'll probably start with one block. And by the time that we get to the entire street, it would be a combination of partnerships with the businesses. Maybe there'll be a business improvement district along with the enforcement with City of Mount Vernon, who will be working together to maintain South Fourth as the downtown corridor. The streetscape, for example, may be uniform on all the blocks, or maybe there may be some uniformity in all of them with a little bit of diversity in all of them. So, these details of design and details of maintenance and details of how it actually comes about is something more piecemeal. And what the comprehensive plan is doing is giving you the big vision of what you can expect to happen in 10, 15 years. And here's a way to get there.
Which you're working towards.
That you're working towards, yeah. So I think we discussed most of that. So I want to jump quickly to the second recommendation, which is reinforce the identity of Bramerton and South Fourth as downtown corridor. Now, this is that bridge structure that you see, which connects the Bramerton Avenue with the, And so one of the things that we heard was East First Street was seen as a really important street for cars entering and also exiting Mount Vernon, right? And so that really does have to be maintained as an all vehicular corridor. And we cannot necessarily make that into, or any section of that, all pedestrian. So what we have proposed is that could there be a village square type of a village square around on the bridge, which not only includes the building that currently has the Edlands. That's the building that you see.
It used to be
The old Bank of New York.
Used to be the bank.
Snipes.
Yeah.
Right. That building, which that you see on the screen, you'll see a white line on top of the or like a white shape with streets. Now that is what we've left for emergency and transit and vehicular access, but most of it, it's all one level and people can walk around anywhere. We've also shown food trucks and I'm sorry that this is not large enough for you to see, but I hope that you got to see it in the draft that you received. But what this also does is another thing that we proposed is that Fisk should be made entirely pedestrian and closed, which is just that section of Fisk Place. And then the Stevens Avenue is also pedestrian, leading up to so just that section, Stevens Avenue. So now when cars have to come, they're going to go on South Third that would be the main, or South Fifth. That would be the way for cars to go, travel between the north and the south, private cars. So that's and we worked this with the police department and talked to them and saw what they needed to do in order to regulate. So this is something that, we vetted with them. And
They're
they
not
found-
proposing to close the Fourth Avenue Bridge. That would be open to traffic still?
No, the Fourth Avenue Bridge is only open to transit and emergency vehicles.
So it's pedestrian basically.
So it's pedestrian
So buses, fire trucks, police, ambulance.
and transit. Either.
I don't think that's gonna work out real well.
Oh, my God,
I mean, during the busy times of day, in the morning and the afternoon. It's a parking lot because of the amount of vehicles that are trying to get from one side of town to the other side of town. And it's a major throughway where you can actually not have to go in and around to actually be able to go straight from one to the other, because so many of the crossings are only in one direction, and then you also have the streets that are only going in one direction.
Yeah. And again, this is something that has to happen over a period of time, 10 years. I mean, we know that Southport and Gramerton has a ton of cars and motorcycles, by the way, because we heard a number of them, many motorcycles, many cars, no bicycles. But then to get from that to a more pedestrian and to even have this as a village square is going to take a while. And we understand that there is going to be, some sacrifices that may have to be made, but then there is South Third and South Fifth that we consulted with the PD in the future could then support.
But third is
potentially
only in one direction.
And Fifth is in the other direction.
No, Fifth is two-way.
Two-way.
But it's really narrow, and because people have to divert around in order to come across.
In any case, if we want to make South Fourth, prioritize pedestrians on South Fourth and Gramerton, I think that this is where you would start to do it. And this is where you'd start to do it, and then it would go, in.
I just wanted to do a time check. We're 7:35, so
Let's go to the third.
I don't know.
we're not even halfway through the record.
Let's keep going.
Let's go to the third one and the third.
And while you're saying this, right, are we gonna make sure, because that has happened a couple times with these meetings, right, that the presentations run so long that there's not a lot of time for actually asking questions or giving input? How are we gonna mitigate that today?
But we can save them for the end.
All right.
Okay, so the third one is make transit use efficient and a convenient choice for residents and visitors. What we are, some of the things that we thought about was how do you make transit use efficient and convenient? You want to get to your transit because it is connected by all other modes of transportation. So that when you're going from your home, you can take a bicycle, or you can take a scooter, or you can take a taxi, and you can get to the train station. And you don't have to pick up your coffee, or make it home. You can pick it up on the way, pick up your croissant on the way. If you look at any major transit hub, they do cater for these commuter conveniences, and they are multimodal. So that's what we try to do with this recommendation, which is around the Metro Northeast station. It'll have maybe higher densities, but it would have in exchange, you would get much better commuter amenities, food and retail around the train station, incentivize multimodal options to get there, and then definitely look at improving the last mile option where you get from your train, you from start to finish, you use your transit, but then what all can you get to your home?
What is this map? Is that Prospect Avenue?
That's Elm.
Yes.
That's Elm Street.
That's Elm
over
Street.
by the Mount Vernon East train station.
That's right. Yeah, it's Elm Street.
Further up.
Oh, okay.
Or goes into La Placita into.
Yeah. It's the backside. Yeah, it's not Prospect.
Can I read some comments that are in the chat? Or do you want to?
I think we want to take that at the end, right?
At the end.
Okay, so let's zip through the fourth one, please. Skip the next slide and go to the fourth one. So this is repurposing underused lots and buildings with interim uses. This is a combination of vacant lots that we've shown, and they are actually on South Fifth. And there's the YMCA building to the right. And one of the things we wanted to say is that there's many ways in which you can work with the owners of the lots to repurpose them with interim uses as they wait development. I mean, they're not going to have interim uses all, for the next 10 years, but something needs to be done with the vacancy, with the underutilization, and with the blight that is, and it's going to take much longer for development to happen. So this is purely, temporary uses, so that the downtown can start to feel more active, can start to feel a little bit more revitalized, and can start to host some of the programs for which cultural programs and music festivals, etc. So two top recommendations there are engaging with engaging with the property owners to assess the current vacancies, and then looking at how that can be repurposed. On the next slide, you'll see what we are hoping to do. What we've proposed is that there could be a toolkit that could be developed and maintained to assist property owners to figure out what they can do on their lots. And on the right, there's an example. You'll see it's 3 vacant lots, all 3 of them. One of them has a painted basketball court, the other one has a community garden, and the third one has a temporary playground. So let's go to the next slide. This was about creating a recognizable network of open spaces and pedestrian connections for a walkable downtown district. So we really thought about this and, realized that Mount Vernon doesn't just have the downtown corridor as one of the places where people go to shop. There are some other places in the city that people go to shop as well, or they go to drop their kids to school, right? So how is it possible to connect these daily chores or things onto like a walkable route that you wake up, you do your shopping, but you also drop your kid to school, and then take your train, you come back, and then you pick up your kid from daycare or do shopping. So we try to think about how all of these uses could be connected in a more of a walkable route, and that would be something that we'd have to study in detail, but there are some early recommendations that we spoke with community members, such as connecting the schools within the downtown on a bike network that we have proposed as early recommendations in this. Let's go to the 6th one. And this is the last one, which again is about evaluating the existing barriers to economic development and advancing a cohesive strategy to assist local businesses and attract new investment, including through an overhaul of the downtown zoning regulations. So Adam is going to speak about a multifaceted strategy to support downtown economic development and really the sequencing and the stages in which it should happen, what should come first, and second and third. But there are a number of zoning changes that we have also proposed, and a number of permitting concessions, I think, that we're requesting we make initially for the businesses. So I want to invite Peter for you to dive into some. Oh, actually, let's get to the zoning recommendations, because I want to speak really quickly about the density. So a lot of these recommendations that we spoke about. Also, how are those urban design recommendations going to come about? It's going to be a combination of the regulatory framework, not only what we write about place-based recommendations, but also the densities and the regulatory framework, because we need the money to do it, we need the partnerships to do it, and we need the policy to do it. So what this drawing is showing is in pink. You'll see is, and this is a full build scenario at low, medium, and high density. So what the light pink buildings are showing, or light maroon buildings, in fact, are the newer densities in the downtown area. And what is in white are the existing densities. So we've shown, if you go on to the next slide, areas of low, medium, and high density. The darkest yellow is the highest density. The one in lightest yellow is the lowest density, which is around 0 to 4 stories. Keep in mind that currently in the downtown, you have what we're suggesting as 4 stories at 10 stories. There are some that are even higher.
Yeah, already, right?
Yeah. Around the train station, we are where we think that most of the improvements, especially with like the decking, even would that a lot of people said what they would like to see in the coming decades would happen. We're suggesting higher densities, and that is going up to 20 stories.
And that's at the bottom?
That is along East First to the right that you see.
Yeah, the upper right, the darker yellow orange.
Okay.
That's
The green is,
Where the
yeah.
green is.
Green is, yeah.
Yeah,
But
so
green is.
where the surface lots are, both the county owned and the city / MTA owns, those sites.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
With that, are you
Trying to
looking
ask.
at renters or for sale housing?
We'll get there.
Right,
We'll get there. Yeah.
because the thing is, we need to bring money into this area. And it's great that we're looking at, affordable housing on that, but affordable to home, right? Affordable to everyone. You can make $100,000, yes, they can afford to live. And in order to take care of a place, we have to bring in home ownership.
Yeah.
As you know, Derek, affordable home ownership. Bread and butter for me, and so and for progress, Adam's team, that's been discussed and I think it'll be important.
So I had a question about this map right along. This map, the light yellow along Gramerton is suggesting up to 4 stories.
Correct.
But then the darker yellow along East Third, which as far as I can tell goes right in back of my house, is up to 12 stories. What's up with that? Nothing there is high. And that is completely a residential neighborhood over there that is not transit oriented, nor, in my opinion, indicated for high density. I would rather see the higher stories on the main corridor, where there's going to be pedestrians and foot traffic and easy access to the train, because I've lived here 25 years and I would not walk from my house to the train station. I don't think it's safe.
Part of that is increasing activity, and this like
Plenty of activity. Lots of activity.
Yes. Know what I'm inferring.
I do, but
Part of that is changing, and I personally do like hodgepodge, but a lot of hodgepodge uses, sometimes creates the activity, which you're talking about.
I don't understand why that went up to 12 stories when even in the beginning of this whole process, back before
Because-
you were here, that was never going to be more than 8. Now I understand.
If I may interject with that.
I know.
It allows for, Sarah was mentioning about affordable housing, having that mix, to get affordable housing, sometimes there needs to be some type of density incentive.
So you would
we
put
wanna have
affordable housing?
flexibility. No. So when we'll get to it, we have debated and talked about, because this is a long-term strategy and people's definitions of affordable housing vary. A lot of, in Mount Vernon, when we've gone out, when we say affordable housing, a lot of folks mean it's like, so formerly homeless, extremely low income. Affordable housing has stages that goes to middle, moderate and middle income housing, or some people call it workforce housing. And so when we have discussed that, we would want a different range of tiers. In order to do that, based on financing programs, what often happens is a developer will just be like, well, I just want to do straight market rate. I don't want to have to do this. What's my incentive? And so having that flexibility, saying, well, if you're able to provide these units to provide diversity of incomes, a wide range of incomes.
We have to ask who this plan is being designed for. We didn't hear in the public meetings anything about attracting more affordable housing to downtown, except possibly from United Tenants. And we're going to create a city of more poor people. Who is going to go?
People who earn, would you consider someone earning 100, family of 4 earning $100,000 a year poor?
A family of 4?
Yes.
They're marginal here in Westchester, Lower Westchester.
Yeah, but would you?
That's, you can do you're never gonna get out of the hole and buy
Yeah.
on that.
They qualify for subsidized housing.
Yeah, indeed, they do. I would,
Now you're picking the very upper tier, right? I mean, when we gotta be intellectually honest here. Whenever we talked about low income housing on Vernon, right? That was never in the $100,000 range in Mount Vernon is almost double of the median income, right? So whenever, where are we right now?
In the
60,000?
You're in
Is that high?
You're hanging around 7.
But the point is, every single affordable housing development I've ever seen in the city of Mount Vernon was low income and it was financed with pilots, right? And so if we're bringing these huge numbers of affordable housing units right now, Library Square, right? I'm not that much in detail informed about it, but I don't think they're talking about $100,000 income housing units. So we're bringing more and more of these pilots, and no, this is very.
I understand.
We're bringing more and more
I
of these
understand.
pilots into Mount Vernon, and we're pretending that we're doing something else.
So you don't know what we're doing because you haven't gotten to my house.
We just
find
need
out. So
to
I'm
get
calling a timeout.
to, we need
There's a
to
whole
get to
slide
this.
dedicated
We really need to
Let's
get
get
to
through
the
this.
next slide,
Yeah.
please, Catherine, thank
Because
you. So let's get to, not the one before that. Yeah, we just want to get to some zoning recommendations and then into the economic development, and we'll talk about that. So Peter.
So these are some general zoning recommendations. A lot of these go into supporting those 6 overall strategies. So after each of those strategies, right, there were slides and obviously, well, I'm assuming this will be provided, right? But we're trying to link up all of these different tactics to support these big strategies. So these are just some of the zoning tactics, right? As James spoke about overhauling the zoning code, right? We got to get to that point. Allow for this active critical mass downtown. Part of this will be right sizing parking requirements. We're not going to hash that all out here. We're not even going to hash it all out in the comprehensive plan because that's a whole study in and of itself. But we know that the parking requirements are too high.
Right.
We know that they're taking up an incredible amount of space in downtown. And I'm not saying the park, and what I'm also saying is parking requirements should vary from location to location within the city. And so what we need to do is talk about how we do that. So this is one of the strategies. So we're not saying come in and eliminate parking requirements. We're saying, let's take a look at this and try to right size this in certain areas of the city and certain uses.
Right.
Yeah, either if I just may piggyback on that. And, one, I would say it was a surprising thing that we heard regarding parking was we kept hearing municipal parking, municipal parking, municipal parking. And the benefit of, downtown are the number of, publicly owned lots downtown. So it's like to provide more municipal parking while taking the cost burden off of a developer to provide, high levels of just residential parking and more transit oriented areas that, usually parking requirements are lower, but people I know who don't live downtown say, well, what about me coming downtown? It's like, well, that would be realized with municipal parking as opposed to, direct residential parking.
So you would have to change to accommodate the scale of the parking required. You'd have to change those municipal lots as they're currently configured.
It would be
Some kind of
integrated.
multi-story
Yeah.
thing.
Not,
So it's also.
not necessarily. Well, so what I'm saying is there's actually a couple different things going on. One is requiring 2 parking spaces for every unit of housing in the downtown in an apartment building simply isn't needed anymore. Just isn't. We've got lots of data to show it. Am I ready to say that it's half of 1 car for every 2 units, 1 car for every 3? I don't know, right? Actually, I have some ideas, but we know that it's not there. But I'm not saying, let's figure that all out now. But I'm saying, this is something we need to get towards. Part of it is sharing the parking for those ground floor tenants, the restaurants, what have you, that can be shared. Some of it could be shared with residential, some of it could be shared with something else, but it's all about an overall strategy that puts them together. So when we talk about any of these items kind of in and of themselves, they are kind of the implementation pieces that require coordination with a lot of these other strategies to get the details right. Because the goal is not to require something that isn't used by a developer or tenant and takes up resources that could go somewhere else, right? That's too expensive or what have you. The goal is to get it right and to require the right balance. And that's gonna change. It's gonna be different for different projects and different in different areas and different from building to building. And I think it's important that we take a look at it. We also know that what Mount Vernon charges as a fee for buying out of your parking requirements is too low, right? We know that from looking at every other municipality around, right? It's too low. So that's a pretty easy one, quick, we can do it, but all that does is get you more money. Not bad, but what are we gonna do with it, right? So let's put that all together. Sorry, and then there are some other kind of more wonky recommendations. You know, let's start getting some of our uses defined more clearly, but also not draw distinctions between every different type of retail use and regulate them differently. Like zoning doesn't create a market for these things. Zoning isn't gonna bring in your stores. All zoning can tell you is what's not allowed. So if you have
And it
a.
can respond to the market or the non-conforming or how it has evolved.
Right, but all zoning can do is tell you what's not allowed. You can permit anything you want in a zoning, but it won't make it come into being.
What's permitted?
Well,
It doesn't. So zoning tells you what you can't do. Zoning wakes up in the morning and says, I'm gonna discriminate against this use because of some good reason. Right? So let's make sure those reasons are good. Let's make sure we think about them. So if you go to the next one, Catherine.
So just a quick question. So in that map, I didn't see anything below 12 stories, I guess, other than Fourth Avenue.
right, and Gramercy,
There's four stories.
and Gramerton up north,
No, he said other than
Ramington and Fourth Avenue.
yeah.
There's a
Now, I
little bit
thought-
more in
All
the,
right, we,
There's more.
one thing that I don't see, which I'm a little disappointed, is townhouse zoning. You know,
Yeah.
why have we just kind of walked away from that and gone from 12 to 20 and
It's not, here's the thing, it's not reclusive. You know, so it's,
well, we know developers. You tell them you can build 12 stories, they're gonna
build 12
and they're
stories.
gonna ask
If
for
for
more.
14.
If you,
You know, and-
you tell them it's a townhouse, that's the zoning, you know,
And
3
that's it.
stories high, 2
we
family.
just, one of the things that we heard was for downtown businesses to have a critical mass to support the businesses.
But you're
all of the
putting,
downtown
you're
corridor.
putting critical mass around.
And
around-
Mount, and, you know, around the, and support the
Putting
transit.
critical mass around the train station. And, you know, even down Third Street, there was a MX1 plan, which started out with some density on the
Yep.
corners
Yep.
and lower in the middle with a mixed use. And somehow that's another story, how that got totally screwed up and went to 12, which there's a lot of scuttlebutt as to whether that's even been vetted properly or
So,
approved properly. So I'd hate to see the same thing happen now that we've got Third Street, another section of Third Street, and have it be 12 stories. It's gonna be. a
That's
canyon.
crazy.
It's just-
something,
wait a minute, I've been waiting.
please. With density, you know, density and height are related but different things. And so one thing we haven't, you know, discussed, we have expressed density in height. But, you know, there's something called, like, there's side yards, there's setbacks, and so.
Yep.
We can play with that massing, and what
That is
MUD
right.
has done
And
is
what-
shown kind of like, you know. Is showing the bulkiest
In-
possible
in-
scenario, but we have already had these conversations, because I know, and I'll bring it up because it had been brought up. Is the, you know, 22nd, the Library Square project, where we spoke with the developers where they proposed a straight up. 11-story street wall, and we told them. You know, this is not what is being thought of. It's like, you start setting back, and they said, well, where do we start setting back? I was like, look around you, try like 6 stories. You need to start setting back and, you know, do different types of stacking, because a straight up, you know, multiple straight up. That, you know, that compromises light and air buildings, you know.
But it's so, to that point, isn't it better to. When we're writing and rezoning, to incorporate those things, whether they're.
That is a-
they're-
yeah,
they're
and we
form-based
can-
zoning or whatever, but to. we all know as soon as you say it's zoned for 12 stories and yeah, you got these setbacks that, there's area variances that are constantly requested. So I just think, not that I want to be out of a job as a zoning chair, but I'd like to be out of a job if we do this right. And they don't come and say, hey, I want to do this or I want to do that. So that's my only point.
And the townhouse would fit in with the village feel.
And Michael is absolutely right.
Yeah.
If we talk about entry and exit from Mount Vernon, Third Street is definitely one of the entry and exit points. And it is at this time, goes directly into Pelham and it is very unattractive. And it could be much, much better looking. We talked about it when we first started talking about the plan for that area. We talked about mixed use, commercial with several stories of residents over. We talked about green space. We talked about pedestrian space. We talked about setback. We talked about green roofs. We talked about charging stations, chest stations, all kinds of things that would make it a very attractive place to live. And now we're into 12 stories on both sides of the street, up and down to the sidewalk. It doesn't fit at all with that area, which is really a pretty nice area of neighborhoods, a place that could be extremely attractive to higher end persons who would want to be able to get to the train easily, recreate, have good dining options. I think we're really missing the boat on that. I understand that 12 stories is much better economically for a
So I
developer.
think Mary's saying to the neighborhoods on both sides of that. Are
These are decent neighborhoods.
these neighborhoods, right? So if you pretty up and you.
Well, I guess it depends. If you can afford to live in Scarsdale, maybe it's not a decent neighborhood, but for me there, it's a very nice neighborhood.
I mean, there are a lot of single family and
Well, agreed.
low density.
And it's one reason we carved out the map we did, because it was like, there's a lot of single family homes there. And the second reason is like, we presented this in very broad terms of low, medium and high density, was to have this discussion. So I want that to be clear, because like, when we say medium density, what we usually, it's like, okay, 8 to 12 stories.
I just-
Within that,
I want to know,
versus
where did the 8
saying
to
it's like,
12
well,
story come from? It was
8 to
never
12.
in there. Where did that come
These are
from?
ranges. These are ranges. We
But-
heard a lot of 8 stories. We heard even 10 stories.
We
We're
didn't
getting-
have
We
that
did.
in the
Not
initial
in the
planning
public
for that
meetings, we
corridor.
didn't.
Heard it.
And we have said over and over again that these
Well,
buildings.
maybe
are-
you, but I heard it.
What's that,
And-
Shane?
There
We
were
said
some
over and
obviously who
over
were.
again that these buildings are gonna be too high. It is not what the public said they wanted. And over again, we are being ignored. And every version of this thing we see, we've got 12-story buildings and
That
20-story
is
buildings.
not true.
Okay, and the other
It
thing
is
I wanted to,
But we did have conversations, and as I said, it's a range, and I said, we are still having this conversation. So.
And the
And you're
other-
still propo- and you're still proposing 20-story buildings and
So,
12-story.
so here's the thing, let's all agree that we have the opportunity to voice our concern, which we are doing.
all right, and I had
It's
one
still-
other
It's
thing.
still a draft, and,
Yeah.
I hope that our comments are reasonable comments
Yes.
and they're said with, that you guys can think about, okay, maybe we don't need 12, maybe it's a 6 to 8.
Yeah, it's
10,
much more
I don't
reasonable.
know. But I think the point has to be taken from your side that we think that many of us think, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but I believe many of the group in the advisory committee, and it was pretty much this group and a few more, we're not looking for high density. I think, around the train station.
We can
to
go
to
for that.
20 is a stretch for all of us, but I think personally think there's reason to do that.
And I agree. I think we are comfortable, by and large, for the high density transit oriented development. Expanding this into some of these residential corridors, no. The other thing I wanted to speak to briefly is about the parking. I hear what you say with the parking. After I read the first thing, I went and I did a lot of research on how do people determine how much parking is necessary, et cetera. And I don't agree with their findings. I understand data, but I also have experience. And I run a meeting right over across the street, Lucialis, once a week. And I live maybe a mile away. And I have to come 45 minutes early to find a parking place. 45 minutes. If I didn't have to run that meeting, I would not conduct business there. I don't even drive down 4th because it's so insane. And the parking garage over here is probably 2/3 occupied by municipal vehicles. Now, you say, oh, well, that's an enforcement issue, but that's the reality.
What about the surface lot?
Which one?
The low grade surface lot.
See, I have a knee that's supposed to be replaced on the 26th. I can't go up and down the stairs from there and walk that far. I'm afraid I'm gonna get hit over the head because there is no enforcement on the street. Just now, somebody, goodness, I mean, she wasn't trying to be mean or anything. She scared me right in my face, just totally mentally ill, you know? And I'm older. I don't feel comfortable. And I'm the person that's got the expendable income. You want me to go shopping there. And I don't feel comfortable.
So I think to the parking point. I think. And I think a lot of these points, but I'll stick with the parking. There are so many different pieces of it that have to come together to work. Part of it is a strategy about where is the municipal parking, how big is it, how is it run?
Yep,
Who's parking there?
exactly.
Are they parking? Are they storing? Right?
Right.
How much are we charging?
Storing.
Can you get there or not?
But
But then.
And no elevator.
But then one of the other conversations is how much parking should we require of new buildings? And so that's a tough one because we all have our lived experience and they're all different from each other. And some of us own 1 car, 2 cars, 4 cars, no cars. And that probably changed during our lives.
I have 2, yeah. I don't need 2, but I have to.
And that's fine, right? And I have 2 cars and it changes during our lives. And so what part of this is looking at each kind of development and each kind of type and where it is to determine kind of what do they need? What should we require of them? Because we don't require they have 2 bathrooms. So why are we requiring 2 parking spaces? Because we don't want too many cars clogging up our streets. Oh, okay, so then how many is, and that's where I think there is a point to kind of come into that discussion. Because we do find out that there is a demographic of people that statistically uses less parking. They just do, and some of them don't. And we even
Don't live here.
right. No, but they don't. But what's interesting is they don't live anywhere, right? I hear this in every community, they don't live here. The other thing I will tell you is that's interesting is we're talking about setting minimums, right?
Right.
There are some
That's the-
developments that come in,
With the
they say
maximum.
you only need 1 space for every 2 units. They said, what are you, crazy? I want 2 spaces for every 3 units.
I haven't seen one of those come to Mount Vernon.
But I've seen them come to a lot of other communities around. So what I'm saying is, I've seen some of that, and I've seen some that says, I don't want to build any parking, my residents aren't gonna need it. So all I'm saying is it's a conversation that's worth having to make sure we're requiring the right things. That's it.
I just want to do another time check. It's about 8:05 right now, and I want to make sure Adam has an opportunity to talk about.
Just one quick question is
Council.
parking, and do we have the specific data from the recent developments on McQuestion Parkway and is it Locust?
I don't.
No, I don't have that data.
Get it.
I
sure
don't
we can
think
get
that,
it.
you know, you want to talk about parking and those are realities, right? Is it the Enclave on McQuestion?
I have.
Yeah, I think so.
So those have rented out at least 2 buildings, and he's building the third. Can we get that exact data? I mean,
Sure.
that's transit oriented, right? It was built that way, it's
I-
right down the block.
And that's what we do
then-
in a lot of communities, right?
And then Locust, the taller building that's been there for a while, and they built one right next to it. So those are all current, like, okay, people that are just moving into
And
Mount
I got
Vernon.
some on Bronx River Road, I got some. Like
All right,
in
so anyway, I think
places, but yeah.
that they should be in the database.
I think something that may contribute to the conversation perspective with regard to parking in the downtown area, because Westchester Plaza is right in the heart of the downtown area. It's walking distance to the train station. We have about 300-ish parking spaces. We have approximately 700 apartments in the 4 buildings. I'm not counting the Quincy, because that's a co-op that's across
Yeah.
the street. And there is a long list of people who are looking for parking spaces, and they're on waiting lists even with the municipal lot that's on Gramerton, North Third, between North Third and Gramerton Avenue for parking. Now, I know some of the people, you know, I talk to my neighbors, some of them do work down in the city and they do take the train, but when, you know, they're home, you know,
Drive.
they
Leave
do
the car.
drive to get to any number of things,
Everything.
and so they need a place to park, and they're in the heart of the downtown area now. There are people that that walk, and there are people that take the bus, et cetera, because it's all right there. But I'm trying to, you know, my sense, and I've been there since 2006, and I've been in that general neighborhood since 1989. That it's a combination in terms of uses, and street parking has gotten far worse.
Yes.
You know, and it still is a challenge because while even, you know, like I said, even the people who use the Metro North, and at one point I used to, you know, travel down to the city. Still, when people are in their off hours and they're doing different things, not everybody is gonna go and shop at Food Town, et cetera, because it's just too expensive. People have other activities they go to. And because it may not be that easy for them to, you know, even if it's, you know, one car to a family, people still want to have cars. They still want that convenience. That's one of the reasons why they live in Westchester, as opposed to being down in the city. And they want a place to be able.
Right, so I think a combination of parking management, a combination with what should be that requirement, because currently, as we hear, is that, you know, the requirements are really high of mandatory parking. So I think we just need to figure out how better management and then better and more favorable or like more optimal standards for new development, and then more
But they have to go
optimal.
hand in hand or
They
it
have to-
doesn't work,
Yeah, and for
right?
that, a more.
That's the
detailed-
point,
right.
100%.
For instance,
So.
I agree.
I think it should really all day long.
All
And
day.
it's empty at night.
Right,
That's
We
the
should-
place that
right.
some people who are, and I think that people have talked to management about maybe trying to see if they could get a parking space to be able to park in that lot overnight.
And I
While they're
can't,
on the waiting list to get a parking space in the garage or in front of one of the.
and I
buildings
can't
that
sell
they live in.
there
Okay,
if they
so
can't.
we move on to the economic development.
some of
We
these.
can come back to this because the economic development and housing,
Right.
you know, does fit into it. And so I just want to make sure that
Mind if I stand up, because this is usually my bedtime, so I gotta stand up and get my blood. So. So, no,
I don't.
I don't speak very loud, so I'm fine. So on housing recommendations, the first important recommendation that's in here is to establish mixed use zoning that will allow housing downtown, right? We know we want customers downtown to patronize the businesses we'd like to have down there. Feet on the street leads to safety. There's a lot of great reasons to have residential downtown. Oh, by the way, the successful downtowns that we see across the region all have it. Okay, so there's good reason to have it. The second recommendation here is to implement an inclusionary zoning policy for rental units downtown. I could talk about this all day because we do 2-hour-long seminars on inclusionary zoning at our center. But essentially, the basic nuts and bolts of a policy like this is that it applies to new construction or significant rehab for buildings that have greater than 10 residential units in. But what it does is it requires that developer to set aside some proportion of those units for people at various levels of income. So generally, an inclusionary zoning policy will require the developer to set 20% of the units aside for people who make 60% of the area median income, or 80% of the area median income, or sometimes 40% of the area median income. Generally, we like to see a tiered system that requires set asides at different levels, so you end up with a building with people of mixed incomes living in it. We'd like to see one design that meets the current needs of Mount Vernon residents. And it's important to understand that the creation of affordable housing, by the way, just so that we're clear on the definition of affordable. Affordable means that we aim to make it so that nobody is paying more than 30% of their income to housing, right? So affordable for me is different than affordable for Peter, is different affordable for my mother, okay? So policy should, so here's the levels in Mount Vernon now, right? Your policy has to be based on the Westchester County AMI because that's the rules, okay? Westchester County AMI, area median income is $151,400. Just so we're clear, that means 50% of people in Westchester make more of that, 50% of people in Westchester make less, okay? The AMI here in Mount Vernon is hovering around $70,000, okay? The median income of your renters, by the way, this 70,000 includes homeowners, okay? The median income of your renters is hanging out around, well, it's exactly $43,869. The typical income of your typical renter is 23% of AMI. Okay? That's the data, that's the facts, all right? So what we're saying is, as we think about having an inclusionary zoning policy, you want to make sure that the developer sets aside 20% of the units in this 30 to 80-ish% range. Because that's what the data show your neighbors need. And that means your neighbors you have now and the neighbors you're likely to have in the future. That includes people like teachers, people who work in the city hall, people who work at the grocery store, and oh, by the way, all those people you want working at these restaurants you'd like to see downtown someday are going to need this unit, okay? Just so you know, throughout the region, the typical renter across the 9-county region where Pattern does its work makes somewhere between 40 and 60% of AMI. That's what the typical renter makes in the Hudson Valley. Okay?
That's still Westchester AMI that you're talking about, and
Yes.
that,
Because you're in the county, your calculation for a policy like this has to be based on the Westchester County AMI.
and that's still really high
Well, it's-
relative to
right.
what the reality of the Mount Vernon AMI.
Yep, and that's because you have some of the richest zip codes in America in this county,
Yep,
right? Let's call it what it is, right?
We know it.
That's so if you say, hey, we need some units at 50% of AMI. Don't be ashamed of that. 50% of AMI is my mortgage. Okay, like that's the level of affordability for a lot of people who you want and need in your neighborhoods. Okay, now.
I'm sorry, but I've got to
Hold on,
interrupt because
James.
all the housing that's built here is affordable. We don't have anything else. We don't need set
Well,
aside.
Well, let me tell you that not all the housing you have here is affordable because 50% of your neighbors are paying more than 30% of their income toward housing.
that's correct.
And 32% of your renters, hold on,
We
Jay.
understand that, we understand that. We all went to the needs house assessment
Okay.
public hearing. But
Okay.
the new housing that's gonna be built, it's not gonna be affordable to these income burdened households either. In fact, it's gonna be less affordable.
So
What do you-
listen, so.
Have you
yeah,
checked out the cost of construction lately? I'm sure you know what it is.
So you have
This
to
is-
follow what, Jane, you gotta let me talk. So if you follow what I'm saying, 20% of the units are set aside at different levels of affordability, which means 80% of the units in that building are then free to be rented out at whatever the hell the developer wants to rent them out of. And that developer is gonna make that determination based on two things. One, the amount of income they need to pay to actually finance the building and pay off the loans they get. And number two is gonna be based on what the market will bear. Right, so they'll do a market analysis before they ever build, before they ever go to their financing, and they will say. In this zip code, we feel pretty darn good that we're gonna be able to give rents of up to X. Right, so what you wanna make sure is you're setting aside some of these units based on the needs your neighbors have now, and based on the different income levels. For the full spectrum of people you want working and living in your community. And then the rest will be based on, the developers need to finance the project and meet the needs of the market. Does everyone understand?
Yes, so you're saying that the only criteria will be the 20% of the units at that 20 to 50% of the county's AMI. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
So what it will be is it could be 20% have to be set aside or 30% have to be set aside, and then depending on how you craft your policy. You can say, of that 30, I'm making this up, okay? Of that 30%, we want 10% to be set aside at 30 to 50. We want another 10% to be set aside at 50 to 70. Or we want another 10% to be set aside at 70 to 80 or 70 to 90. So you're creating tiers of affordability within a building, so you end up with a true mixed income building.
All right,
That
so
makes it-
let me restate it. So you're saying that 30% of the units will be set aside incrementally up to, is this an arbitrary thing, 80%?
Whatever you decide.
And then, so therefore, 70% of the building would likely, hopefully, maybe be rented above that at
I mean,
market rate.
generally they are.
Yeah.
Because your ability to actually finance, right, the developer's ability to finance those more affordable units is contingent upon building many more units that are at a market rate to balance out the balance.
So unfortunately, we don't seem to see that with developers that come here. They all seem to hug the bottom end and are getting, you know, financing from the county and the state and all that. And what Mount Vernon does need is a little more income that's discretionary so that these downtown and these businesses that come in can have a successful business. So this is great, but how can we dictate that to developers?
That they build above that.
Well,
that-
but
that
they
they're
build
more-
it, let's say the 30%.
80% are market rate housing.
So can you
Legally, it's-
dictate that? No, but here's the question. If, and here's kind of the rub, right? If you. How do I put this? A lot of the development that's coming in now that's getting financed, that's an all affordable project, right? That's getting money from the county or the state or everywhere. The thought is, this is the thought, if the zoning permits a greater density of housing, it will attract a higher income product. Okay, so that's the thought, right? If,
Erroneous thought, but thought.
well, how much, what's 40, is it 44 or 40? What's broad?
42 each.
Either, that's all right.
He doesn't live there either, he can't.
That's
No, he doesn't, but hold on, so I've heard. People complain about how much the rents were, or say, who the hell is gonna live there, right? So I've heard that. So the thought is, would a zoning policy that allows some more density? Let's debate what that should be, because I don't have the answers, I don't live here. Some more density, would that attract more developments that would attract a market rate similar to that? And if that's the case, which we all think it would be.
See, but here's the,
Do we want to make sure that as that happens and as these folks move in, that we're not at the same time pricing out the people that live here, that live near here, and that want to live here? We want to make sure that we're future
but
proofing.
that's what this presentation is stating, right? We're not
Yes.
eliminating
We
that. So,
basically want to not encourage displacement
All right.
at the risk of having, you know,
But what if 42 floors were built?
yeah.
And then
understand.
average rent, they were allowed to charge, and the average rent started creeping into 6,000, 6,500, 7,000. Then all of a sudden, there's this huge gap of like, we have the senior housing, we have the extremely low income, and then we have, you
all
know,
right, so I'm not
Yeah.
disagreeing with this in theory. The question really is, though, can it be legislated? Because if we zone, if you say, oh, we have to zone higher density so we can get this. If we zone higher density, but we don't make sure that this is what happens, then we're gonna get whatever somebody comes.
And by this, you mean if we don't
So let's say-
legislate that there's nothing above 60 or 80, we're not gonna get it.
No, you don't go all.
No, but you don't go all low.
Of 30, that you have 30% of low.
Got it.
And then
Not,
then
So-
other 70 does go lower.
Well, so here, they're gonna make a lot more money building housing that rents for $7,000 a month than they are getting grants from Westchester
Yeah,
County.
but we also know that there's
Yes,
a
are.
push in the state for affordable housing. And there's money that's being thrown at it.
Yep.
And you zone for 10, 20 stories, and then all that money's out there, and there's nothing saying that you have to do this. They're gonna take the money from the state and the county, and they're gonna build affordable housing.
I
That's
don't,
what happens.
I don't.
I haven't seen
I
anything different
honestly
in Mount
don't
Vernon.
think so.
No, the presentation that was made on the vetoed on Library Square The developer in the plan had one set of numbers that looked better, then he showed up in City Hall at a public meeting, and then all of a sudden, the building's like 60%. So it does happen, and it's
It's 60% what?
area AMI.
The whole building?
Yeah, he's pushing it. And then
Because of the finance.
it's the income level.
We had
Let's get
a
lower,
developer
lower,
on
lower.
West Street that put up a building, said it was gonna be, you know, mixed like this, and it's all affordable. It's all lower,
Yeah.
below 50.
And that doesn't help the downtown development at all.
Question here. How do you protect it yourself? How do we protect ourselves? Everything going on.
Right.
That's
Right.
That's the
Exactly.
I didn't
If I may,
put it-
if I may, I think there is, and that is just I think there's an entire fallacy in this thinking process, right? Because we are always saying, oh, you know, we want to maintain affordable housing for the people currently live here, right? And we have.
How did they get here? in
Not
the
those
first
exact
place? They've
people.
all been.
No, but that has, if we look around, what happened, we can legislate that. If we build affordable housing in Mount Vernon, right? People will come from the surrounding areas to live here in that affordable housing. The people who've been here are gonna stay where they were before. So all we're gonna end up with is more
More
affordable
people.
housing and more people with low income in Mount Vernon. I don't know if that is part of your study. Have you studied Mount Vernon in terms of how much affordable housing we have compared to our surrounding communities? Have you done that? That's what I just wanted, because it's like, we're just gonna build more of it.
But see, I don't, so I hear what you're saying. When we say affordable housing for the people that live here, you're right. I don't mean the exact people, because we can't dictate that through zoning policy. 100% agree. What I'm saying is this range of incomes of the people that live here, the types of people that live here, that's what we're talking about. So what we have seen in other areas, this might be not a great example, but I'll try it. Village of Portchester, very different than the city of Mount Vernon. Very different. They rezoned their downtown. And they are letting 12 to 16 story buildings in. And the people, you know, there's all sorts of questions about how we're doing this. Parking is one of them. That's another one. The fact that it's underwater is another one. There are a lot of issues, right? But they have, I don't know, a dozen different developments that have come in.
2,700 units.
One of them was an all affordable project that was surplus land that was owned by the Archdiocese. They actually withdrew, and they're coming back in with an all market rate proposal. And all of them have 10% set aside 81. Now, it is a completely different community
Right,
than
and
the city of Mount
that's the
Vernon.
difference. You can't really compare. Unfortunately, Mount Vernon has a problem. It has a reputation, it has problems. And you can't get people to just not look at that. And you know, from a developer standpoint,
So did Portchester.
Yeah.
well, but not as fair as Mount Vernon.
We got a reputation. I'm sorry. I've been.
Not as bad. And it's
We got
smaller, the
reputation.
downtown area is smaller
Smaller,
and
lot of
contained.
issues.
I mean, we're so dense compared to Portchester.
Yeah.
And they, you know, and they did something with that that retail strip that, you know, changed things and got restaurants in there. I don't know what happened. It's close to Greenwich. I don't know why, but they were
They're gonna
definitely more
shut
successful.
Portchester, right?
And I feel safe walking on the street
But
in
anyways, I
Portchester.
don't- you know, the
and I
thing
don't
is,
hear, so
the
go
fear
figure.
is that we're just gonna get, and developers might say, listen, I can't get market rate housing.
And what's gonna dictate it is the financing. If they go with tax credits, taxes being 6%, it's gonna bring it down. So can you legislate the type of housing that comes in? That's the.
Right, again, that gets back to, so is that possible? Does anybody know?
Say again, can you
Can something like this be legislated?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
so listen, let me just, we've written the pattern, we've written the inclusionary zoning policy for New Rochelle, Portchester, and Ossining, and they've all been adopted
Okay,
with great success. We've written it for Poughkeepsie, we've written these.
so this is doable then?
It's been done
From,
many times, yeah.
okay,
So
Yeah.
the thing I want you all to keep in mind is. What I hear a lot of the concern about is not affordable housing, because as affordable housing, as I just defined it for you, is just people paying no more than 30%.
Whatever they
understand
come
that.
What I hear concern is you don't want super, super low.
Yeah.
For super, super low income housing.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you. That $2,271 a month is not super, super low.
No, it's not, that's not it. It's, we do not want concentrated of 60% and below. We want a true mix.
Right.
We want to try to figure out how do we bring in people at 80, 90, 100, and 110%.
Now,
That's what we need to figure out.
Here's where you have to be careful. The thing, I have a discussion with this city, but one of the things you don't, in my opinion, want to legislate is saying, and oh, by the way, developer, you must include units at 130% of AMI. Because if their market analysis shows that the market will not yield that
They won't.
for a number of reasons,
They won't even.
because of the zip code, but also because rents have outpaced wage gains so much over the past decade that it's unbelievable, then guess what you're gonna do? You're gonna
So you
have
said-
all development, you're gonna get.
You said this was successful in a few municipalities. What do their plans look like?
Their plans more or less look like some version of this, but tweaked ever so slightly for sort of their particular needs, okay? But they look more or less like this. They generally set aside either 20 or 30%. Some set aside as little as 10%.
Is that the case in New Rochelle with all of those developments?
We wrote the one for New Rochelle, and theirs is a very complicated one that we wrote for them. It's actually, the way theirs works is we give different points to different tiers of affordability, okay? So you get more points for 30, a little less for 40, a little less, a little less for 80, okay? And the developer has to reach 10 points. So for some of them, you get a fraction of a point per unit, for some you get a full point, and they have to reach that 10 points within the building so that they can build their project. So what you end up with is you end up with some developers saying, hey, we're gonna build a very small number of 30s and 40s, and that's how we're gonna make up for our allocation. Some say we're just gonna build 80s and we're gonna build a crap ton of them in the building. But they have flexibility then to choose the quantity at different levels of affordability that they want to build based on their capital stack, based on their financing sources, and it provides some flexibility to them. Yet at the end of the day, you're still yielding units at varieties of.
So do you have a specific recommendation for the city of Mount Vernon?
I mean, our recommendation.
That's the work. I'm sorry.
So listen.
The reason that will work, I did something very similar. 425 Grand Conference is the largest passive housing unit in America. I built that with Trinity. And I went to the council member. And I said, this is what I need. He wanted parking. Couldn't do parking because there's a train station that goes underneath. I'd be paying like about $10 million a parking spot. I couldn't do it. So well, then what can I do to make you happy? Because I need to go, I was going down to about 50% AMI, because I need to go down to 30% of AMI. So go down to 30% of AMI, I can't afford to build this building. So they got to let me go up to 130. So do something very similar, have a sliding scale. If they come down, and it can be mobile, it can be living, breathing. The next time they rent somebody, they rent to somebody.
All right, so then there is.
Developer's point of view now.
Don't frame me into something.
No, just the
No,
math,
no,
the math
No,
equation you're making.
no, I am a community, I run
No,
I
understand,
run
I
a
know.
very successful nonprofit development company. So don't put a developer hat on and make me the enemy,
No,
because that's what they're gonna
I
get.
did, no, that was not my intention.
Okay, so please don't.
My point is the math, it could be that the community says, if this math doesn't work for the developer, maybe we just don't want it. Right, there is this thing, it's like, oh, the sun goes up in the morning, the grass is green, Mount Vernon gets high density. Maybe if the math doesn't work out, I understand from a developer point of view, it gotta work the math.
Right, but what about our
Right,
point
it's
of
not
view?
gonna work, but also it has to work for us. And one thing that we haven't taken a look at, and they're talking about density, but we haven't been asked about the size of the apartments.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. They've.
Okay, so now that's another thing that I want to go off the rails, but we gotta take a, we don't want a 100 square foot, one bedroom, right?
They got a lot of
So
studios
that's-
and stuff.
So that's something that folks have to take a look at, the size of the actual units. But when it comes to, listen, I hear you, what's being said. We want to keep the look in the field, but you can't keep the look in the field and afford to support it. Well, building out a strip of shopping, who's gonna shop there? Right now, you build it, no one's gonna come. We have to build a critical mass. People have to be here in order to shop and support it. So what comes first? Does the housing come first? Or does the downtown come first? Or do we try to do it together? And how does that work?
For the the
Time
general
check, it's
rule-
8:30 for
Yeah,
people.
the general rule of thumb is that residential leads commercial. That's a common phrase in the economic development world. Which says if you don't have people living there, ain't nobody coming with a restaurant.
No one's looking to come into Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
We have to go out. Every time somebody comes in to visit me, it kills me that I have to take my dollars and go spend it in another community. I'd like to support the businesses here so that I don't have to pay as much in taxes.
So an excellent
We
opportunity.
already have the population. We are very densely populated. We don't need to put more people in
We have
downtown.
poor people that
to-
can't
to-
afford
to have
patronize the
people to shop.
businesses. That's the problem.
An
We
excellent
have very poor people that
opportunity
can't afford to patronize. the
for
business.
us to develop that residence versus commercial feeds who comes in, who comes second, would be on Third Avenue, going from, say, Fulton out to Pelham. There's some places there that are really not attractive. Walking distance to the train, could be made pedestrian friendly, is aching for commercial on the first floor, could do green space, could do e-buildings, could have rooftop gardens, could do so much through there without the destruction of a lot of existing housing stock. I think there's only one building on that building right now, that on that stretch there, that has like 6 stories. And it's just a perfect place to start from ground zero and demonstrate this, but to do it correctly. And I
Wait,
think
but is
Axel has.
that in downtown?
No, but you've
Okay.
got it for
She's
12
offering us no
stories
No,
over
no, no,
there.
is that in our downtown boundary?
It is
That is-
not.
It's
not.
It's not,
It's not in our downtown boundary.
no.
It's
You're talking
Third
about
Street.
Fulton
It's
Avenue.
it was the old MX1 district.
But
not-
So
Correct.
the MX1 starts where you guys have finished off on this.
Yeah,
map.
right.
So, and you have it on there
Yeah.
for high stories, which I don't think it should be. And I want to recommend you to see the street in Tuckahoe. I'm sure you've seen it. It's lovely, right? It looks great. There's mixed income housing there. They are townhouse looking. And I mean, it's charming. That's what I'd like to see us.
Suits are very wide as well.
Pardon me?
Suits
The only reason I asked about downtown is because
Wider,
Street.
but Third
we've got
Street's
more
very wide,
and a lot more city.
because there's all those cars double parked all the
Pretty small
time.
areas.
So I think we should move on to the economic development recommendations, and we need to come back to density real quick, so let's.
I'll just say again, like, this has worked really well elsewhere. You're not so sufficiently different that.
I don't think anybody is in disagreement. I don't think anyone here is.
70 to 80% market rate.
But the key
Yeah,
is
to move
what
forward.
the recommendation is to the council.
Sure.
And if you leave
Yes.
it vague or just say, hey, this is a good idea, I think that's a mistake. I think that, minds have to come together and say, hey, this is what we think makes sense. And maybe it's different for Third Street as opposed to, right at the train station, but I think you guys need to put that in your proposal so that it's considered.
That we may, I'll just say, it's part of what we have to talk about. That would be pretty unprecedented for comprehensive plans.
So what?
So level of specificity.
People,
No, so what we're talking about is the level of specificity.
I understand what
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
talking about.
Okay.
I don't need it. That's what I said. So what? Be bold, You don't have to be the same all the time.
We need the help. We just need the help.
Understood.
I have one quick math question. So if you're
Understood.
looking at the 20-30% of affordable units, is it basically, is it a given or is the idea that basically the other 70-80% carry to 20-30? The 70.
Yeah, I'm definitely balance out, right? So the more market rate units, help the developer, make an argument to the bank.
So it's unprecedented.
That the way to pay for these units is to actually have, again, you're on a 4-to-1 ratio here, right? You're 4 times the number of market rate units that you would be affordable units, and that's how you balance that.
Somehow it's gonna emphasize that you don't
They do some of these tax credits coming out of everything in the line.
Right.
You're gonna have some type of balance so that we got people
Right.
that can patronize business.
And that's why you do the commercial that's attractive and you have to do all those amenities because you're not gonna get that.
And people that have disposable income can then support.
That is exactly right. Who need to park their cars? Not on my street.
Those spaces.
Other things that we were asked about, so I want to talk to you guys about the fact that you are part of a region and part of the state that is seeing the same challenge across large geography. And one of those challenges is that the cost of home ownership is sprinted away from people far faster than they can catch it. And so the graduation right now from rentals to some form of home ownership is shut down across the region.
Yep.
We see it in the regional data that we studied. This is our entire job and pattern. So one of the questions is, how do you reestablish that rung on the ladder? And one of the ways you can reestablish it in a place like Mount Vernon and within the downtown is to work with some of the nonprofit developers who are building shared equity co-ops. Where your median home price right now in the city is bouncing around $600,000. Okay,
That including co-ops?
no, that's.
I think it's including everything.
I think that includes.
I would say that it includes everything.
So it's like it's 610, one quarter, 580, the next, it's bouncing around 600,000. That means that if you like living in Mount Vernon and you're a rental and you'd like to stay here, but you'd really like to own a piece of your community, you've got no shot. Okay, so the way to help establish that is you do have some nonprofit developers working around who are building shared equity co-ops, which are the next rung on the ladder. You can go from a rental to a co-op, save up more, you can go on to that single family home. Habitat, I mean, you're fortunate to have a Habitat chapter that serves both New York City and Westchester, and they have a lot of experience building and managing shared equity co-ops. We talked with them at length for this study, shared a couple examples. They're good-looking buildings. They're an opportunity for ownership that otherwise doesn't exist in your community right now, and we think it's something that's worth pursuing.
We do have a lot of co-ops, though, yeah.
And
We
so-
do have a lot of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, they're able.
You don't need to do that because you also have folks that have money that want to move in. We are situated in an area that has how many train stations in?
3, 4, 1, 2.
You're saying that all of the fourth cells, it's under the fourth cells.
This is the mix. If you've got trail mix, this is the race, okay, it's not.
I like the race.
And then the other thing that you may want to think about, this is a little more technically difficult, but we are starting to see some cities throughout the state go to what's called a community land trust model to allow for long-term affordability of housing. And under a community land trust model, there is a nonprofit that owns the land on which the housing is built. So it takes the land speculation cost out of the cost of housing. Again, this is a little more technical. This is a little more difficult. They're doing it in Albany. The biggest one, I think, in the country is in Vermont. There are some others around the state that are doing it. It works well, but you got to get the details right. And it's tough to just jump into something like that, but that's an aspirational.
It also keeps it affordable for perpetuity, because it doesn't go out of the.
I just want, we are exploring that on different levels. You know, we have actually the comptroller has an interest in that because a number of city-owned / URA / IDA-owned lots. Can we utilize a community land trust model for some of these parcels, and who would we work with from the not-for-profit side to help us manage from a community-based standpoint?
And that would be rentals, not home ownership.
No, it would be home ownership of the equity share.
Well, see, the thing is this, right? We gotta be careful for something. You also want to benefit upside to. The folks that came out of the, World War II, the JAB building came in. Well, we want them to be wealth creating as well, but we don't want somebody to flip it. We can do what the city did, right? I think they did, after 21 years.
Oh, yeah, I mean, even if you go look at Co-op City, it's got the same kind of an idea, right? That you own shares, you have to sell it back to them,
That's
you
not
know.
well coded.
No, it is not well. Neither is that.
It can be,
Just
not the community land trust. If you burn off your subsidy over.
You don't have to pay it back, yeah.
Then it can go to market, and then you can.
Right, then you can support, so just so you know, if you wanna bring someone in who can talk about this. The Capital District Habitat up in Albany is doing shared equity co-op on a community land trust and rentals on a community land trust. They're doing it as a mixed thing. And they've been able to track the equity gains over a period of time that they're getting out of the co-ops on the community land trust. The data are pretty darn compelling, and I think, you know, that might be something to like to see. That's good. All right, next. You guys have woken me up now. This is good. So economic development recommendation, right? Before I share this, let's just level set what the economic
And hear
development
him well.
recommendations are meant to do, right? Our economic development recommendations, we want them to support existing businesses and attract new ones to downtown. Wanted to establish a strong focused system of governance here in City Hall. You guys heard me talk about this a lot. Make sure that the city administration pinpoints goals, assigns staffs, and follows through until they're completed with economic development tactics and strategies. We want to create stackable network of investments and incentives that will entice the kind of economic growth that you want and need. We want to identify programs that will help the city fund these goals to the extent possible. We want to revitalize the downtown through new development, adaptive use, rehabilitation of existing buildings, improvements to the public infrastructure that make it safe and attractive for merchants and their customers. And we want to ensure that new development yields maximum volume of public benefits possible. Those are the goals that we had in mind when we crafted this. And again, you guys have heard me say this, I know I'm repeating myself, but when it comes down to a good economic development strategy, you got to ask yourself 3 questions. What do we want to accomplish? What sequence should the different tasks be pursued in? Because it does matter what you do first, what you do second, what you do third. And in the case of, you know, a place like Mount Vernon or any other city, it's who are the staff members that are going to be assigned each task with deadlines to make sure we're actually following through on them and accomplishing. Right? Okay, next. So the economic development, sorry, this is a little small, but I'll read it out loud. So the economic development recommendations we made are broken down into 3 stages. The first stage is sort of what I call getting organized, right? Second stage is critical incentives, investments, and programs. And then the third stage is just, let's call it longer term stuff, okay? The first stage recognizes that for better or worse, economic development is a competition. And the bar in the communities that surround you has been set very, very high, okay? So the question becomes, what do we need to do in Mount Vernon to put you on a good equal footing to the rest of everybody else, where when someone thinks about where am I going to site a business, where am I going to grow my business, that they're thinking about Mount Vernon. Number one recommendation we have is that the mayor should establish an economic development cabinet that includes key departments and key personnel that get together once a month to review things that are in the pipeline, go over them together. She can break chops, whoever can break chops about, hey, we got to get this permit done and out the door. Let's get moving on this. What does it take, team? Let's go. Okay. This is very common in the cities and large villages, extending all the way up through the Hudson Valley. And we got to make it sort of like a common practice here in Mount Vernon. And we outlined how to do that. Modernize downtown zoning. We talked about it all night. You saw the list of things that aren't allowed. And I'm sure some of you went, that's strange, right? So modernizing the zoning is important. Providing and relaunching the IDA with an open for business message. When I interviewed economic development experts from around the region, one of the things they said is it's hard to get a project through in Mount Vernon, and we don't feel like Mount Vernon is telling us it's open for business. So you need to express outwardly that you are. And the relaunch and revival of the IDA is a good moment in time to say, Mount Vernon is open for business, and here's what that means to us. Okay, because that sort of stuff matters to the economic development. Okay. Stage 2 is critical incentives, investments, and programs. Listen, the Brownfield Opportunity Area program that the state runs used to really only concentrate on parcels that had pollution. This program has changed substantially in recent years to concentrate on areas that have critical vacancy, critical masses of vacancy and concentration. Okay, so downtown Mount Vernon is like a really good candidate to have a Brownfield Opportunity Area nomination. And what that means is that developers would then get a tax incentive from the state to refurbish some of the buildings or build on some of the empty lots that you have here downtown. Again, as I go through these, think of these as stackable, right? You can get one incentive or one program on top of the other to help build the financing necessary to do so.
Didn't we have a federal economic development zone track in Mount Vernon? Is that still? Is this still?
So federal through the EDA, you'd have to ask the Hudson Valley Regional Council, which is your gateway to economic development administration grants, but I'm pretty sure you do have a designation similar to what they have.
Yeah, it's like, it's in the downtown
The
area
opportunity.
too.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity zone, right?
Yeah, it's an
That's different.
That's different than this.
No, I know that, but isn't that something from
Yeah,
an economic development standpoint that?
That's another
That's better.
stackable.
So can you guys put that in your, to let the people know that it's there? Because it doesn't seem to be,
they have. They
right, nobody's.
No one's doing anything
nobody's
with
looking
it.
at it.
The next thing is to adopt and advertise our what's called 485A. So 485A is a tax credit program that the state enables you to pass. It only comes to your town or your city if your city council adopts 485A. Here's what 485A does. It's called the anti-blight tax credit. And the way it works is if you have a building that does not include residential, but you want to add residential to it, you get a tax break on the improvements to the building, not the underlying value of the building, but the improvements made to the building to refurbish the first floor commercial and add residential to the building. It is a 12-year tax credit that sunsets over time. And if we're talking about thinking about downtown and instead of on South Fourth and Graham and not allowing housing at all, and instead saying, let's allow some housing on the second and third or the third and fourth stories, this sort of tool is very powerful to entice the building owners who might not otherwise have an enticement to do that. Okay? Collaborate with building owners on New York Main Street grants. I'm not going to get into too much detail on this one, but Homes and Community of Renewal, they run a program called New York Main Street that will either go one building at a time to do facade restorations, or they'll even do an entire block. So that's a program we're looking into. This one, I think number 4 is perhaps the most important one in section 2, and that is create downtown momentum through the use of an RFEI process. RFEI stands for Request for Expressions of Interest. Other cities across the region have used this in a very powerful way to dispose of city-owned property into the hands of a developer with very specific requirements for what that developer must do with it, so that that parcel is used for something that the community needs and wants. I took Catherine and James and some others here from Mount Vernon on a tour of the city of Middletown, where they have a business improvement district that's been very successful. Part of their success has been using the RFEI process and city-owned parcels to get new stuff built in their downtown. The way they do it, I'm gonna just make it very brief, is they take the city-owned parcel, they sit down and decide, what do we need in this part of the city? They then put it out, as a bid to say, we are seeking a developer that will do X, Y, and Z. The contract has development deadlines that the developer must meet. It is very strict in terms of what they must build. And the city maintains a mortgage on the property until the construction is done. Because if that person gets the property and they sit on it, the city takes it right back.
That's Middletown, New York.
That's Middletown, New York. They did it in Middletown. They've done it in Hudson.
I'm from Middletown. I'm good friends with Joe DiStefano.
Ask Joe about it.
I know how it goes. I'm still very well connected up there, but it is a different city and there is enforcement. And the mayor up there,
Yes.
from one end of town to the other, he doesn't politicize, he just,
That's right.
and Sean has to. I mean, it's a different animal here in Mount Vernon. So,
It's got what, 9, 10, 11 parcels near downtown that are vacant.
yes, but I lived there when the downtown was sunk too, and it's coming along, but his business is on that main street too, let's not forget.
So this is a very, very powerful tool that if used right, can be the thing that sort of kickstarts your momentum. So we are recommending you use it. Establishing a community benefits fund to ensure private investments yield public improvements. Again, not going to go into a ton of detail. But for instance, certain types of development, you can ask them to put funding into a community development fund. And you have to outline very specifically what those community development funds can be used for to increase parkland or community facilities or other things like that. Really should be collaborating on some of these programs through the CFA process, state CFA process. You guys are really, really competitive for. Like, trust me, you will be competitive. For things like Restore New York that does full building and facade restorations, EST capital grants, other things like that, that cities are using. to great effect. And then establishing a marketing campaign, pitch downtown investment and give the area a consistent, right? You really need a professional to do that. You can't staple that thing and put that thing together with Scotch tape. You need a professional. Then as you get through that, then you might be ready to think about, for instance, creating a business improvement district, right? We toured a couple of them. They work really well. The business improvement districts tend to prioritize, help me out here, 3 things: cleanliness, security, and events.
Yep, public
Those are the
space,
3 things.
public space.
I thought I was gonna forget, Captain. Those are the 3 things that they tend to prioritize, okay?
And that
And-
public space really counts. I mean, you want to use Middletown, they have made Festival Square.
Yep.
They've done all kinds of things that are great there. But the other thing that they did in Middletown that we do not do here and is really becoming a problem here. is Joe put in an ordinance that you could not own more than a 2-family building unit in Middletown unless you lived in it. So gone, all these absentee landlords. And right, what we're having now is a huge influx of external money, buying stuff low, really ripping people off in many instances, rehabbing as cheaply as possible. Right down the street from me, sold at 200. I had an offer in for 240. They passed on it with a cash one for 200. Sold it for 750.
So if you don't mind, my voice is starting to give out, let me just. Pursue strategies for vacant properties.
We're not
including
gonna talk
temporary-
about that.
What's that?
We're not gonna talk about that, huh? That's a really critical piece of what's going on here.
It's market capitalism. I mean, you're gonna have to change a lot of things in the
So-
United
Yeah,
States
you're
to
right.
do away with it.
You're right.
I'm just saying, you may want to talk to your senators about that.
Pursuing strategies for vacant properties, including temporary use, and we actually included the design of a few vacant property registration ordinances. And some of those are pretty effective because they require the owners of vacant properties to show that they're interacting with a licensed real estate broker, for instance. If they don't show it, they get fined. Requires them to open their space to temporary art installations and other things that will activate the ground floor space. If they don't, they get fined. I mean, there's actually some sticks and carrots in there. And then last, I'll just mention, seeking funding for streetlights and security cameras. We heard a lot about some of the malfunctioning streetlights, implementing some of the things that were in the 2022 report StreetSense did that was very good, but you're just not quite there yet. Working with Westchester Community College, they have a really good program that they're interested, that they are actually functionally expanding here for business training. And then this gets back to something we talked about earlier, creating open street weekends where you can close down some of the other streets for a day or for a weekend. And you can do that even through something that we call tactical urbanism, which is making some big, very nice looking planters out of concrete that you can move and put, as almost like makeshift bollards in the streets for a day or for a weekend that can then be easily taken out, set things back the way they were to begin with. And that allows you to try it on a temporary basis. And if you really like it, then you can make it more permanent. If you don't like it.
That's
they
what
can
will
go away.
happen when we're thinking about that Millet Square and we kind of like, step
Yeah.
back. You want to think about it, you want to check about those pilot projects. Okay, so if we're done, we can wrap up now and on to the next slide, please. And we kind of had advisory committee comments as we were we were doing the presentation. So in the interest of time, we'd love to jump to the next steps.
And just on that, just please, this week, if any additional comments you have, send them to Catherine and I. Just we want to be able to get to the team before the end of the week, so we've already started texting and sidebarring with each other based on the 2 cents, so please.
I think the biggest issue has been the 12 story. In that, so, I mean, is there
It's per
consideration
street,
to be like
Yeah.
6 to 8, shifting that down? Because that's kind of I think
We could redo that and stick it, it's an opportunity to really go to town and make a beautiful street. I think.
So was Catherine taking notes? Somebody taking?
Yeah, well, we were taking.
You were.
Yeah, so the biggest issue, as you said, with the density is really East Third Street at 12 stories. But you think that East Third Street should be
Lower and more
lower,
yuppie, if you
maybe
will, for lack of a better word.
okay.
Green.
And also locking in how to lock in the 70 to 80% market
The
rate
AMI.
versus
Yeah.
the 20.
And I invite you all to come to my house and you can see exactly, no, seriously. exactly the impact on this neighborhood that
Right.
is one street over
Right.
would have from a 12
Right, we get it. So that.
story in back of it. It's incredible, yeah.
It makes it great, or else we call you.
I could cook you anything you want.
I like that. But I think, for the most part, I think the things that we heard from you were, okay, this, what were in the details. And, you're right, the devil lies in the details. And the comprehensive plan is a policy framework. It is an overarching framework where we now, have a pathway to get to our, pathway up more or less, not a detailed pathway, but we do have some idea of how we get there. But again, it is a combination of how does time, 5 years from now, you may want to look at this comprehensive plan and you may say, oh, I want to change this inclusionary housing to this, and there could be an amendment to it. So I think where we are today, it is flexible enough. It is a framework enough that, we, from what we heard, we think that you're generally in agreement with
Some of the larger principles, yes.
yes, the principles.
Some of the larger principles. When we get down to the nitty gritty about areas, no. I have an issue with the data that was sent out because it was unreadable in many instances, particularly with a map. I'm pretty good with a map because I'm old enough that I predate GPS, So, and I was like, where is the
Can't, but did you also get a chance to look at the draft and read the draft advisory?
Yeah, I have that, right? Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yes, they were unlabeled.
Yes.
Also
I
unlabeled.
called her right away.
Well, then I think that what that was probably, and again, that probably is an InDesign error, which is faded out and that layer
makes it more
probably
difficult.
behind.
It does.
Yeah, so it's,
When you
you're
get-
absolutely right. That layer went like behind the app, and so that.
After an
I think
immediate.
that one thing you said you were gonna discuss, which didn't come through yet, is the multi-use zoning on the downtown Fourth Avenue. The bottom two would be commercial and would the top two be residential? Is
Mhm.
that?
Yeah.
And then the design, you're suggesting a design. How does the design get locked into?
So that's.
Is that code enforcement? How does that happen?
Flexibility that would permit residential, but
Yeah.
necessarily be
Not
strictly
required.
residential, so if someone wanted to build.
Both commercial.
To level point fitness or something like that, they would be allowed to, but if they want to go residential. they would have the flexibility.
But it's part of the critical mass is that you want people there. So
Yes.
if it's all commercial.
And so that's why surrounding, it's a fine balance. You're absolutely right,
Yes.
Wendy. There needed to be we want a village feel.
Yeah.
And we want,
Yeah.
and we also want, so you'll see that flanking the downtown corridor and those blocks are 8 to 12 stories. And that's why surrounding it within like a 2-minute or 3-minute walking distance, you don't have to get into car. We have medium density. And so that's the balance that we sort of struck, maintaining the village feel, tree lines, and we asked over and over again, I think the village feel was, everybody felt 4
But
stories.
townhouse does fit into the.
Yeah.
And so.
I don't think it-
That part hasn't been.
What we want to say is again, details.
I know that.
And
but
what we
again,
want to see is like a townhome, if you have a 20-foot frontage, which we don't know what are the frontages in the downtown? Is it a 20-foot frontage? Is it 15-foot? Is it 25? Is it 40? So, you may not, the parcels and the lot sizes may not be accommodated to having to accommodate townhomes yet, but we don't know that. So we're not saying that we're excluding them. What we're saying that the village feel means 4 stories. Now, if there is something at 20 feet where you can get a set of, stairs inside, and then you can have a 16-foot by, or like 12 to,
But use it as a
Right.
for example, I
That
think
is-
is what we want.
Right, so I think that
Not
a lot
that
of these
it's-
details, and that's why a lot of these details we don't put into a comprehensive plan because it does need a much, much deeper and a much longer study. I think that if, the city is interested in it, we may take up the city could take up specific to downtown corridor, or now let's focus on the downtown and figure out the zoning and have it be a combination of form-based and a combination of, FARs and rather than.
And we still have the opportunity to go back and reconsider, as I said, part of it is like maybe looking at certain blocks for, I don't know, both of you were saying.
Yeah.
Like where, and yourself, just like where can we find slightly lower density just on specific blocks that.
Exactly right.
And how does it feather out to the
Yeah.
areas outside of
Exactly.
downtown,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If we drew this imaginary
Yeah.
line as if the world stops, which it doesn't,
Right.
right? So,
Similar to New Rochelle, I mean, like, the inner blocks are like 6 to 8 or 4 to.
Right.
But the tall ones are on the.
And back to the Third Street thing, it's closed right now. I
Exactly.
mean, this is a
Yeah. For 2
fabulous
years.
opportunity. Oh, for years, who knows when it's gonna be open again, right, Mike? Really? I mean, it could be years. It's a fabulous opportunity to do a pedestrian, good quality residential and commercial area, and it's an entree into our city. That, I mean, I just can't, sometimes I get disgusted how bad it looks, right? It's terrible. And, I mean, we have auto shops. The thing is there are a lot of people that have businesses there that have political chops, let's be straight.
Yeah.
So their investment is in an 18-story building, but there's who do we serve in our community? Do we serve us, the regular taxpayer that lives here in our homes and, live and love here? Or do we serve the people who want to make the maximum profit out of their holdings? And I mean, I would love to make the maximum profit out of my holdings too, but there has to be some kind of give and take, it can't be all profit and forget quality of life, because we're not going to sustain ourselves economically with that attitude. If we look at the more affluent areas around us, you will see that the appearance and the amount of people living there, as well as enforcement, I know that's not your gig, but nothing we're doing is going to work unless we have enforcement and an improvement in quality of life. Those are all the things that are most important. And those are the things that drive wealth building, because our equity goes up, because our properties become more marketable. Not 20 stories and things.
So we've blown past the witching hour.
Yippee-yi-yi. I miss the voice.
I appreciate everyone's willingness and energy to stay here over an extra hour. It's, believe me, it's what we want to hear. So next steps, just to clarify, are to, for all of you, just your comments have not been expressed here yet, or you want to re-edify?
Reiterate?
Yeah, reiterate your comments. So just
We'll just edify you.
edify, yeah.
Edify you for the first time, but if you insist, we can re-edify.
Edify your comments, please, and Catherine, myself. Again, the city council hearing will be next week.
I invite you to come to my house. I'm serious.
Okay.
I want you to come and see my backyard, and I want you to see where a 12-story building could end. And on the Arcan property. I will have lost the entire pleasure of my property
Are we going
and
to
thereby value.
receive the revised draft plan?
Yes, please.
So that is something that, given the, number of different reviewers, we are, that the advisory committee, the planning. and-
Electronically, I mean.
Well,
yeah.
I just want to be able to, yes, on the 25th is when we will.
it's not,
Oh,
you don't,
because it won't be
advanced
final.
reader.
you don't have it right now.
You don't have it right now to give it to you,
If I have.
but we had, 6, 7 reviewers.
Yeah.
And then this slide back, other than the beginning ones, with just were rehashed with some of the new information, economic development. Is that going to come out to us? Because those, I think, are
Yeah.
the highlights that are.
Yeah, and the feedback
Yeah.
that's given to us today will be incorporated for the 25th. Right? I mean, as soon as we can figure that out.
So just to be clear, New York state law requires a minimum of 2 public hearings to adopt a comprehensive plan.
So we're not,
And it has to go to the county. And there has to
For
be an
60 days.
environmental review. So
or we can give that.
that's the fair minimum.
Who's doing the
Are you
environment?
doing it in phase?
No.
All of
It is a public hearing also under New York.
Right, so the
State law.
first
Specifically to hear the opinion of the public, right?
I understand.
Now, if I go there, have zero information, only listen to you
So
guys
the-
talk, it's not. a
So I-
hearing, it's a
So the
lecture.
first public hearing, Axel, you won't be able to comment. You can comment generally like we're doing tonight, but they'll have to have
It
it.
kind of misses the idea of.
Well, that's
Well,
why the
that's
state
the
actually set it
process,
up to
though.
do
I mean,
that,
it's, you know,
but that's the bare minimum, right? That's just state.
Are you adopting is it going out for adoption in phases or all? That's one big.
For the
plan?
first phase, it's, you know, it's different, adopting a framework, not the entire plan, and so. Framework will be incorporated into a greater comprehensive, the final comprehensive plan. So there may be some adjustments depending on how it fits in the greater comprehensive plan. But it's, you know, that's part of the second phase that we've begun already. You know, we've had two community conversations already, and we'll have a third before the end of the
But
year.
you're not sending phase one out up through the state and all of that for adoption,
No,
are you?
I wouldn't go.
No.
No.
No,
This
I
is
think
just
that's
for
gonna be
county
one
review. That's why we use
adoption.
the short form
Yeah.
environmental is just so. It empowers the city council to start considering changes, because again, council did not want to move on anything until there was a document that they could base
Oh, really?
decisions on.
Well, then they were moving on detour.
And it.
Well, they were legally required to have a public hearing.
Oh, I see.
We are actually way past the timeline that the previous
Okay.
city council
Okay.
negotiated.
Okay.
So I let the lawyers handle that, and it was just like, I had pushed it out to August because they wanted to have it in June.
Well, you know, and I do want to say that
Yeah.
even though we have a lot of input and criticism and thoughts about this. I and Mike were the chair and co-chairs of the land use subcommittee on the charter revision. And we're responsible for there being this effort right now. Because we're the ones that wrote it to put it on the ballot, and the ballot passed it.
Taking that credit for that.
Well,
I'm kidding.
well, okay, you don't have any credit for it then. I did it. That's fine, Mike. And, but, well, there were several of us that worked, and Axel was on it too, he was working on it too. But this was something that we really, really wanted to have badly. And the community passed it, like what, 95% or something, it was ridiculous, I've never seen that kind of.
Oh, on the
a
amendments.
Yeah.
It's 95. And by the way, guys, I really, really like reading it. I think you put in a tremendous amount of work into it, right? And I see in that you're not trying to be lazy, and I appreciate that.
So we don't want you to feel that we're,
It's-
you know, beating you up, even though we're beating you
I
up.
really appreciate like how much effort you put into it, and I really enjoy finding it. I think there was a lot of informative stuff in there, that really guided my views and decisions.
We just have an opportunity to do the right thing. and-
I mean, it is something you guys are doing in after 50 years almost.
Exactly,
Really, really appreciate.
and we just
Coming out
do
and.
the best
Yeah.
that we can, and we
But-
want everything considered.
Absolutely, but we also want to say is that we cannot solve everything in a comprehensive.
We hear you, but
Like
we're gonna try.
several other- We cannot solve everything, especially with regards to the public
Guiding
hearings.
principle for those tough
With
decisions.
regards to the public hearing, I just want to say that we have 2 public hearings, which we will have when for the full comp plan. So you'll have that opportunity too, in addition to this.
I just find it absurd to go into public.
Yeah.
I ask for, I just.
But I mean, by the time we get to the other 2 public hearings, hopefully there'll be a lot more information.
And so somebody goes in They're not gonna be any kind of. Right, hearings. I don't think that's.
That's fine. And it sounds like we put a lot of pressure in the turnaround, so we are. Pumping it out further against the holidays. And we're.
But you understand that.
But that's.
Yeah, I would.